For hundreds of years, a vow has been kept. The kingdom of Callow has stood against its ancient foe, the dread empire of Price. Across more than 70 wars, they have clashed. Steel has met flesh, and blood has stained the fields. The cost of this endless conflict has been devastating. More than 70 times, Price has sought to conquer, and more than 70 times they have failed. But with every failure, the enemy learned. The empire learned a painful lesson over the centuries. Never meet the legendary Callowan knights. On an open field of battle, it was a truth paid for in blood. A truth the legions of Price knew well, but this time the rules had changed. The tide was turned by a single man, a shadowy figure known only as the Black Knight. With a single word, he unleashed devastating power, and the pride of Callow was brought to ruin. The Knights of Callow are thrown aside like toys. The battlefield is a graveyard of silver and blue. A young squire, barely a man, looks up in horror as the sound of heavy footsteps draws near. A dark figure walks through the carnage. The survivors recognize the approaching dread. They see the malevolent glow from within his helm, the commander of the calamities, the Black Knight himself. But even in the face of certain doom, the Callowan spirit refuses to break. The Black Knight raises his blade, glowing with an unholy light. He cuts a path through the Callowan ranks, his every strike a death sentence. He is a storm of emerald fury, a whirlwind of destruction. Even without his sword, his power is absolute. One by one, the heroes of Callow fall before him. Their bodies are left discarded in the mud. But the sound of thunder echoes across the field. Another figure in horned armor appears on the scene. He stands alone against the last of the Callowan cavalry. He faces the thundering charge without a hint of fear. His eyes glow with the same malevolent energy. But the Knights of Callow will not yield. Suddenly, the battlefield is consumed by fire. For the Black Knight is but one of 5 the dreaded calamities, each a master of their own brand of ruin. And this is not a story with a happy ending. This is a story where the monsters overwhelm the heroes with sheer numbers. In this story, evil triumphs. The Black Knight surveys the ruin he has wrought. A subordinate approaches, noting the falling darkness. She is the captain, another of the dreaded calamities. He asks about the other members of their monstrous fellowship. The ranger, it seems, left as soon as the fun was over. They stand together, masters of a burning world. Their victory has created a river of blood and a generation of orphans. 20 years later, one of those orphans is making her voice heard. Meet Catherine Foundling, who learns a hard lesson about tavern brawls. But even with a split lip, the fire in her eyes refuses to die. The crowd roars, hungry for a brutal finish. She stands in the pit, an arena where only the strong survive. But for Catherine, this is just another day at the office. A way to earn some coin without anyone important finding out. Her opponent throws a wild, powerful hook, but she slips under it with practiced ease. Her eyes gleam with a fierce determination, and she unleashes a vicious uppercut. The impact sends him reeling, his guard completely broken. As she moves in, a strange energy gathers at her feet. She follows through with a devastating kick to his side. In the fighting pits of lore, victory is all that matters. The crowd screams for a bloody end, a lesson she learned long ago. She raises her leg, ready to finish this. And with one final brutal stomp, the match is decided. She turns her back on the booing crowd. Her only concern is collecting her hard-earned coin. But even in victory, her gaze remains sharp. She spots several legionaries scattered among the patrons. An idea sparks a way to get into the War College. The War College, the only officer school in the entire empire. Catherine needs just a little more coin to leave this town behind. She knows her own people would call her a traitor for her ambition. But they forget that the streets of Lore were once safe. Before the new imperial governor bought out all the local authority, a man named Kojo, who intends to bleed the town dry. The people whisper of his cruelty, but Catherine knows talk is cheap. After all, the governor reports to the Dread Empress herself, who seems to have a very hands-off approach to management. And Catherine is no fool. A rebellion against Price is just a faster way to die. So she'll walk past the ghosts of old heroes and forge her own path through the enemy's gates, and join the legions of terror. She'll use the Empire's own machinery to rebuild her home. But Catherine knows this path won't be easy, for power like coin must be taken from someone else. She walks through a land that is no longer a place for heroes. Here, the only rule is to keep your head down and keep moving. Any reasonable person would walk away from the scene unfolding in the alley. A voice in her head screams at her not to get involved. She can't do anything to jeopardize her plan, but her conscience clearly has other ideas. She asks herself why she couldn't have been born reasonable, and answers that question by smashing a plank over the man's head. Her eyes are filled with a cold, hard fury. She reaches for the woman on the ground, telling her they need to leave. But the man she hit is already getting back up. He lands a heavy blow, sending Catherine staggering back. His partner seems more concerned about his friend's well-being. The man complains about the attack, but his ally notes she was unarmed. Catherine doesn't give them time to regroup, lunging forward again. She justifies her actions, stating he was hurting the girl. She holds a broken blade to his throat, demanding to know why he hit her. His partner suggests they teach her a lesson for interfering. But the other man notices a detail on her clothing. The bell insignia of an imperial orphanage, and suddenly the men realize they've made a terrible mistake. Their only way out now is to leave no witnesses. He tackles Catherine, his intentions now deadly serious. As he overpowers her, he tells his partner to deal with the other girl. He sneers that she should have never gotten involved. Because this is no longer an age for heroes. But a voice notes that gloating is always a mistake. An armored hand suddenly clamps down on the second man's face. A new figure in black plate armor lifts him effortlessly into the air. His partner panics, grabbing the other girl as a hostage. The alley becomes a frozen tableau of violence and fear. Catherine stares in disbelief at her would-be rescuer. Of all the people who could have possibly intervened, it had to be the Black Knight, the boogeyman of Callow. The thug tries to threaten him, calling out to an unseen captain, who reveals himself with a manic grin, ready to join the fun. The legends say his sword feeds on the souls of the innocent, which is why he has supposedly never lost a duel. Some whisper that he can even see the future. A terrifying thought for the girl caught in the middle. The thug desperately tries to claim allegiance to the knight, but the Black Knight sees right through the lie. The man's mind races with all the terrifying rumors. Right before a heavy fist sends him flying. They say he leads armies of werewolves and is worshipped by orcs. Catherine stares up, asking if this is truly the man of legend. He answers her unspoken question with one of his own. Yes, he is the Black Knight among other things. She forces herself to meet his gaze, her own resolve hardening, but her voice falters as she begins to speak. She introduces herself, only to be met with his knowing stare. He reminds her of his reputation and his claim to know everything. He tells her she's not in any trouble, much to her surprise. He turns to his subordinate, suggesting they take the girls to a nearby safe house. Reporting this to the local guard would only alert Governor Kojo to their presence. The captain then asks what to do with the other girl. The Black Knight orders one of his men to escort the other girl home. His soldiers begin to clear the alley of the unconscious thugs. But he informs Catherine that her company will be required for a while longer. She immediately questions his reasoning, arguing that if they're avoiding the guard, they don't need a witness. The Black Knight simply smiles, calling it a matter of curiosity. He offers a hand to help her up, and Catherine can only swallow her fear. An armored gauntlet clasps her bandaged fist, a strange alliance forming. And so, Catherine is led away by the most feared man in the Empire. They arrive at a hidden safe house, the doors bursting open to receive them. Inside, the thugs from the alley are bound and gagged. The sound of a chair scraping across the floor breaks the silence. Catherine wastes no time, asking the Black Knight for his true motives. He simply says it's curiosity, and asks for her opinion on Governor Kojo. Catherine replies that the words she'd use for him aren't exactly ladylike. He playfully asks if she considers herself a proper lady. She explains that everyone hates the governor, but they're too afraid to speak out. But she's certain many would take action if they could get away with it. The knight then asks about Kojo's relationship with the local guilds. Catherine calls it a love affair, bought and paid for with gold. The knight continues his interrogation, asking about the city guard. Catherine reveals it's an open secret they do Kojo's dirty work, a fact that has apparently reached the capital. She explains that Kojo is so focused on profit, he's strangling the town. The taxes are supposedly temporary, but they never seem to disappear. Her hands clench in frustration at the injustice. She leans forward, her expression hardening. She asks what will become of the men who attacked her. The two thugs lie motionless in the corner. The knight explains that legally, their fate is in the governor's hands. He explains that for their crime, the law demands a minimum of 5 years in a cell. Catherine slams her fists on the table, outraged by the lenient sentence. She can't believe they'll just be back on the streets after that. Not after they tried to harm that girl and kill her. The knight suggests she underestimates the horrors of an imperial prison. But Catherine insists that no punishment is enough for what they did. The Black Knight watches her, a calculating look in his eyes. A small smirk plays on his lips. He draws a dagger, offering her a different kind of justice with a single word. Catherine's heart pounds as she realizes what he's implying. He explains that in this world, everyone has a role to play. The main characters in the timeless struggle between good and evil. A role is not a person, but a title with a name. A title that comes with powers granted by the gods themselves. Catherine can only kneel, overwhelmed by this sudden lecture. The knight reveals the one thing that separates them from ordinary people is will. The unshakable belief that you know what is right and will do anything to see it done. He slams the dagger into the table, asking what she believes is right, and how far she is willing to go to achieve it. Her heart pounds in her chest, the weight of his words crashing down on her. Catherine takes the dagger, her shadow falling over the bound men. They can only shudder in abject terror. She asks if she has the right to take justice into her own hands. The gag on one of the men slips down, and he begins to plead for his life. But Catherine realizes this isn't the first time he's done this. He panics, trying to blame the victim for how she was dressed. His pathetic excuses are cut short by a sudden, brutal end. She stands over him, wondering if she should feel anything at all. The remaining thug trembles, knowing he's next. She asks if this is how it always feels. To make a decision so cold, but she knows they deserved it. With the deed done, she has a question for him, and he tells her to call him Black. She holds the dagger, repeating her request to speak. She looks him dead in the eye and asks if he's a monster. He smiles, confirming he's the very worst kind. The Black Knight then calls for one of his lieutenants. A door at the edge of the room creaks open. A soldier appears in the doorway, awaiting his orders. The knight tells him to dispose of the bodies and clean the room. Catherine is still reeling from the sudden violence. The Black Knight hands her a fresh set of clothes. He tells her to get cleaned up for their next destination. Her eyes narrow, suspicion replacing her shock. She asks what's next on his agenda for her. He casually suggests they're going to a banquet. Catherine wonders if she should bring a party favor, He reveals it's Governor Kojo's banquet, much to her surprise. The night seems to move on, but Catherine isn't finished. She suggests that if nothing else, she should bring the knife. As they walk through the city, Catherine questions their casual attire for a palace visit. But Black simply states that his armor is suitable for any occasion. She retorts that it's perfect if your main goal is stabbing people, and immediately regrets testing the patience of the most dangerous man alive. They are met by another armored man, who asks Black about his breakfast company. He addresses him formally as Lord Black, showing his respect. The man reports that his targets have been located in the eastern woods. Catherine is confused, remembering she was the only one with Black. The knight gives her a knowing sideways glance. He notes that she looks like she has a question. She prefaces her question, saying it might sound strange, but she has to be sure, asking if he happens to be her long-lost father who put her in an orphanage to save her from his enemies. His soldiers can barely contain their shock and amusement. Black calmly informs her that no, he is not. With that worry off her mind, she follows as he tells them not to keep their host waiting. They make their way through the city's stone-paved streets. Their host for the day is none other than Imperial Governor Kojo. Catherine wonders why the Governor General of all Kalo would pay him a visit, but she knows it might be unwise to keep asking questions. Catherine admits that if this helps get Kojo ousted, she doesn't care about the details. Black explains that the Empire receives half of the taxes Kojo collects, and the amount has been suspiciously high. She asks why the Empress would be unhappy with more gold, but Black reminds her that coin doesn't grow on trees. He explains the capital is concerned about Lore's well-being, and that Kojo is fostering unrest. He continues his lesson, stating that dead men don't pay taxes, and killing rioters only drives rebellion into the shadows. The Empire's policy is to use Kalo, not abuse it, but Kojo's greed is causing more damage than he knows. The key to Imperial control isn't fear, it's apathy. But the Governor's actions are making people care about who rules them again. And that, Black concludes, is a very dangerous thing. They finally arrive at their destination, the Imperial Governor's residence. Catherine stares up at the fortress-like manor. Another of Black's lieutenants approaches with a report. He confirms that General Orem and his legionaries are in position. Black notes the general's eagerness, as Catherine wonders why the 5th Legion is here. She realizes they're expecting a fight, but Black tells them to move on. His subordinate urges them on, calling the governor a little shit. Catherine is stunned by the casual treason. She looks at Black with newfound admiration, calling him her favorite villain. The subordinate laughs, suggesting they keep her around for the entertainment. The other soldier makes a dry comment, and Catherine can't help but notice his resting villain face. Black states they should hurry, suggesting a little violence might be needed to set the mood. As they walk, Catherine can only think of one word to describe her new companions. Villains. She admits to herself they can be funny, almost likable even. But she quickly reminds herself of the truth: they are still villains. Black explains that just because they hate the same people, it doesn't put them on the same side. It's a hard lesson, and one Catherine knows she must remember. At the doors to the banquet, she asks if she should just observe, but Black invites her to interrupt all she wants. She realizes he's testing her, and his subordinate confirms that life itself is a test. A silent challenge passes between them. A challenge that hangs heavy in the air. The soldier's dry wit earns a sarcastic retort from Catherine. Black simply smiles and asks his other man to open the door. The soldier named Saba places his armored hand on the gate. His expression is grim as he prepares to make their entrance. He shoves the doors open with a thunderous crash. Inside, the banquet is in full swing, with guests laughing and drinking. The tables are groaning under the weight of a decadent feast. A spread fit for a king, paid for by the suffering of the people. A grand chandelier hangs overhead, a symbol of Kojo's greed. Soft music fills the air, a stark contrast to the violence to come. At the head of the table, the governor enjoys his feast. His hand, adorned with a gaudy ring, grips his goblet. This is Kojo Agrinya, the man bleeding Lord Dry. But the party is officially over. The guests turn in shock as the uninvited arrive. Black's subordinate issues a simple command: leave. His eyes flare with an unnatural power, reinforcing the order. Catherine feels the weight of his words, a suffocating pressure. The other guests are paralyzed by the same invisible force. They scramble to obey, fleeing the room in a panic. Catherine wonders if this is the true power of a name. The sheer pressure is almost too much for her to bear. But Governor Kojo tries to play it cool, welcoming Lord Amadeus. He claims he would have prepared a better reception if he'd known. Black's subordinate cuts him off, stating that few can use that name, and Kojo is certainly not one of them. The governor's composure finally cracks. He quickly backpedals, blaming the wine for his mistake. Black's man gets straight to business, asking about the late taxes. Kojo offers a convenient excuse about bandits and new taxes. He complains that the locals are being uncooperative, and has the audacity to call their suffering treason. Catherine is utterly disgusted by his arrogance. She immediately calls out his ridiculous lie about bandits. Arguing that no outlaw would be foolish enough to attack an imperial convoy, Kojo then turns to her, telling Black to muzzle his stray dog. Wrong thing to say to a girl with a brand new knife. She explodes in fury, lunging across the table with the blade. But Kojo catches her wrist, stopping the attack cold. He calmly warns her that she's the one who should be worried. Black calmly warns Kojo to take her seriously, reminding him she already has a body count. But the governor just laughs off the threat, unimpressed. Black's gauntlet clenches as he prepares to change the subject. He steps behind Catherine, accusing the governor of treason. Kojo's confidence wavers, calling it a baseless accusation. Black's subordinate chimes in, holding a painting for dramatic effect. He spins a tale of a governor whose taxes were supposedly stolen, a story that would surely pique the Empress's curiosity. He reminds Kojo that the Empress has very little patience for liars. Catherine watches, realizing Black is savoring every moment of this. As the story continues, she sees the governor begin to tremble. Catherine's lips curl into a confident, knowing smile. Saba asks her to guess the story he's telling, a story of payback. She calls it payback for the orphans eating scraps and the guards' brutality, and personal payback for the events of last night. She lays out the accusation. Someone hired bandits to rob the convoy, someone who would then split the gold and buy their silence. The other subordinate, Dooney, mockingly calls her a clever dog. But Kojo scoffs, claiming any confession can be forced through torture. He dares them to try and convince a court of his peers with a peasant's word. But Saba reveals a critical detail. The Empress has taken a personal interest. Kojo's reflection is caught in the blade as he's told a trial isn't necessary. But he scoffs, threatening that his powerful uncle will start an uprising. His eyes, however, betray a flicker of desperation. Catherine can't help but laugh at the pathetic threat. She mocks his childish defense, asking if he's going to tattle on them. But Saba admits that the governor does have a point. Or at least he would have if his uncle hadn't disowned him this morning. Kojo can only stare in disbelief, calling them insane. Saba calmly asks the governor how he truly expected this to end. Kojo erupts, revealing his ambition to become chancellor and claim a name. Black asks Catherine how a ruler should deal with treason. She finds the usual method of pikes a bit pointless after a few weeks. Kojo raises his hands, finally accepting that he's been caught. He claims that unlike them, he knows how to face his end with dignity. He pulls out a vial, intending to take poison with his wine. But Saba just flashes a wide, predatory smile. He leans in close, telling Kojo he no longer has a choice in the matter. His death will be anything but dignified. Just then, the doors to the banquet hall are thrown open, and a squad of heavily armored legionaries storms the room. Kojo desperately pleads with Black, trying to stop the inevitable. But the legionaries are already dragging him away. His protests ignored. He screams Black's name as he's hauled from the room like common trash. And with a final thunderous slam, the doors seal his fate. The once lively banquet hall is now eerily silent. Catherine swallows hard, the tension hanging heavy in the air. She asks if this is the part where he finally makes her an offer. But Black dismisses the idea, stating it's far too late to go back now. She understands then that she is completely at his mercy. But instead of cowering, she finds her resolve, stating he's wanted something from the start. She lays out his plan, starting with him wanting her to deal with the thugs, and then bringing her to witness the end of the man behind her troubles. Black feigns indifference, but she knows he had a purpose. She argues that his actions were too calculated to be random. It felt less like a coincidence, and more like a carefully presented gift. He casually asks why he would ever offer her such a thing. Because whatever he wants, he needs her to agree to it willingly. He gestures to the empty chair, inviting her to the negotiating table. The seat across from him is a silent offer and a test. But Catherine knows that sitting down means playing the game by his rules. She walks past his subordinate and towards the empty chair. The man with the resting villain face watches her with a cool gaze, while the other closes the doors, sealing them inside. Catherine slumps into the seat, stating she's done enough for one night. She knows she's playing with fire, but she's already been backed into a corner, so she might as well go out swinging. He explains the offer began the moment they crossed paths in that alley. She wonders if he orchestrated the whole thing, but he denies it before she can speak. So either he can read minds or he's just a very convincing liar. He admits he's a splendid liar, but sees no need when the truth serves him just as well. He quotes a sacred text, explaining that to take a name is to embrace the strands of fate, but he slams his fist on the table, calling fate a coward's excuse. He claims every choice was his own, and Catherine retorts that's not a great selling point. He doesn't expect her to love the Empire, knowing she's lived her life under its boot. He then mentions a conversation he had with his spy mistress, Scribe. The very same, he confirms, recalling a lively tavern scene. His spy mistress believed the money Catherine saved was to leave the city and start over. But Catherine wonders why the Black Knight would care about an orphanage's funds. She looks him dead in the eye, asking what conclusion he came to. Black explains that Scribe, for all her intelligence, has never had a home. So she couldn't understand Catherine's true ambition. The War College. He correctly guesses she has the coin and is planning for the spring semester. Catherine is stunned, wondering just how much he's figured out. She plays along, confirming his guess with a practiced smile. He asks why she'd want to go, and she offers a simple lie about her talent for fighting. But Black immediately calls her out, asking her not to treat him like a fool. Catherine decides that if this is the end, she'll at least speak her mind. She's tired of biting her tongue around monsters and offers him the real truth. She erupts, stating that at best the Empire is fair, but at worst they get men like Kojo. She declares that someone needs to rein in the vicious idiots, and the legions of terror are her only way to get there. Even if she dies, she'll make sure to leave a scar to remember her by. Black notes that most people with her views would try to be a hero. Catherine scoffs at the idea of trying to restore the old kingdom. She points out that the royal line is dead, and a new war for the throne would be a pointless bloodbath. With Price not going anywhere, she's decided to accept the Empress's rule. His subordinate can only stare, stunned by her cold pragmatism. and then he bursts into laughter, admitting he was wrong about her. He tells her she could never be a hero because she lacks the right mindset. Catherine retorts that after his big speech about roles, that's a real heartbreaker. Saba offers her a job to make up for his earlier dismissal. Catherine freezes, realizing she's been manipulated this entire time. Despite her silent fury, she asks what the job entails. But it's Black who stands, revealing the true offer: he needs a squire. He begins a story from the dawn of time, of gods both good and evil. These divine beings made a wager, a contest to decide the very fate of creation. This cosmic game would be played out through the wars of mortals, an endless cycle of conflict, fueled by a divine bet. And over time, patterns emerged from the chaos of fate. Some roles are eternal rivals, locked in a struggle between good and evil. But other names are transitional, their place in fate uncertain. They can mature into a role on either side of the divine conflict. A quote from a sacred text echoes the weight of that choice, and the choice he offers Catherine is the transitional name of Squire. She's stunned, wondering if he even has the power to make such an offer. He explains that while the choice is personal, his own name gives him influence. Catherine immediately cuts to the chase, asking what he wants in return. But he dismisses the idea of a trade, calling it a matter of apprenticeship. He assures her he only made the offer because he sees her as a valuable asset. Catherine considers the weight of his offer if she had a name. She could rise through the ranks of the Empire, past the Empress and the Calamities. She could even surpass the few remaining named in Callow, both heroes and traitors. It would be a shortcut to her goals, a way to do some good in a fraction of the time. But Black wants her answer now before she leaves this room, and a part of her desperately wants to say yes. Knowing the name of Squire is a path to greater power, it would place her at the side of the second most powerful man in the Empire, giving her access to the secrets of the imperial court and the strategies of the very man who conquered her homeland. But that's exactly why she hesitates, because she's never been this lucky. She has to know the alternative, asking what happens if she refuses. Black promises to send her back and get her into the war college regardless, a far cry from the grim fate she was expecting. She's stunned, asking if he's not going to dump her body by a lake. He admits that some of his predecessors would have been far less merciful. He then reveals a rather unsettling historical trend, that most Black Knights were killed by their own squires. He explains that he already has followers, equals who stand among the Calamities, and even a single superior in the Empress. What he wants, he explains, is a true apprentice, not a burden. Catherine recalls a sermon she once heard about devils. The most dangerous ones give you exactly what you want and let you find your own way to ruin. She asks if he realizes her goals will remain the same. Even with a name, she will still want to change things. He reminds her that he's a villain, and tells her to use any power she gains as she sees fit. He gives her free rein to reform the Empire as much as she is able. He watches her with a confident, knowing smile. He picks up his goblet, a silent toast to their new arrangement, and Catherine accepts, sealing the deal with a drink of her own. Her new companion casually drinks from the disgraced governor's goblet. Catherine can only curse the man and the day that led her here. He makes it all sound so dangerously reasonable. She questions her own arrogance, the belief that only she can fix her home. But in the end, her doubts don't matter. The only thing that matters is how badly she wants this, and she's always known the answer. This is how villains are born, when a goal becomes more important than goodness. A small, knowing smile spreads across her face. Black sets his goblet down, the silent agreement sealed. He rises from his seat, their business concluded. Catherine asks how this all works, sarcastically wondering if she needs to summon a demon. But Black calmly informs her there's no need for such theatrics. He explains that a simple announcement of her new position would normally suffice. That declaration of will would be enough to stake her claim on the name. But Catherine immediately picks up on his careful choice of words. He admits there's a shortcut for those who are so inclined. She notes that he definitely seems to grow in stature when he's winning, but she steels her resolve, ready to own whatever comes next. She looks him in the eye and asks what he needs her to do, and he responds with a smile that is anything but reassuring. His subordinate flashes a manic grin, offering a simple piece of advice. Before Catherine can even process his words, her world explodes in a flash of pain and shock. Her eyes widen in disbelief as a blade pierces through her from behind. Saba watches her, his expression cold and detached. Her body falls back, sinking into an unknown darkness. Her consciousness begins to fade away, but her eyes snap open, finding herself in a strange new place. She's submerged in an ethereal green light, surrounded by glowing runes. She finds herself in a murky, ethereal swamp. Catherine sits in the water, still processing the betrayal. A figure in black armor appears, and she realizes who would do such a thing: villains. The armored doppelganger offers to remove the blade from her chest. Catherine panics, telling the figure not to touch it. But with a manic grin, her double rips the sword free in a spray of red. She looks around, wondering if this is some kind of symbolic quest. Her double retorts with some sharp advice about her social life. Catherine grumbles that Black forgot to mention the snarky spirit guide. She asks if she drew the short straw before trying to snatch the sword back. The double proudly calls herself a spirit guide, inviting a question. Catherine asks how to finish this quickly, but is told to ask better questions. She calls out the lie, asking if they're meant to fight each other. But the guide simply points her towards the next part of her journey. In the distance, a lone hill is bathed in an ethereal light. Catherine squints, trying to get a better look at her destination, but she's suddenly struck by a powerful unseen blow. Her double admits she lied again. They are going to fight after all. Catherine rises from the water, promising to drown this twisted reflection of herself. The spirit just grins, finding her own terrible pun absolutely hilarious. Her armored double dodges the attack with ease. She admits to another lie before pointing out a new problem behind Catherine. Catherine's eyes widen as she realizes she's been distracted. She whirls around, sword at the ready, just as a ghoulish creature rises from the swamp. She cuts it down, wondering if she's losing her mind. Her double watches from a branch, promising to let her kill it again if it gets back up. But the trial takes a bizarre turn as a second head sprouts from Catherine's shoulder. This just keeps getting better and better, doesn't it? She demands to know why her double is so against her, only to be told the problem is her conscience. The double claims Catherine has pretty notions about how things should be, but flinches at hard choices. She warns that those same good intentions will be the death of her. Fed up with the lecture, Catherine lunges forward with a furious scream, but her armored self easily catches the blade, stopping her cold. Catherine uses her footing to trip them both into the murky water. They crash into the swamp with a massive splash. Her double insists that goodness is irrelevant, only victory matters. She draws a dagger, ready for the next round. Catherine charges again, swinging her sword in a wide arc. But their blades meet with a resounding clang, locked in a stalemate. Her double asks if she will be a force of change or a victim of circumstance. Fed up with the lecture, Catherine breaks their stalemate with a powerful swing, but her armored self rushes forward, closing the distance between them. Catherine lands a solid blow, smashing her fist into the double's face, but the spirit retaliates with a swift cut from her dagger. She smirks, proud to have drawn first blood in their duel, but Catherine grins back, promising that only the final blow matters. She catches the double's arm, their blades locked once more. They struggle in a tense, close-quarters battle of wills, and with a surge of power, she sends her armored self splashing into the swamp. And with a final, brutal thrust, she drives her blade into her double's neck. The armored spirit stumbles back, ready to deliver a speech of her own, but Catherine cuts her off, pointing out her lack of focus and discipline, accusing her of only knowing how to break things until she herself is broken. But the spirit just laughs, a manic grin spreading across her face. Catherine demands to know what she finds so amusing. The double points out that this time, Catherine didn't flinch. And with that final observation, she falls back into the murky water. Catherine is left alone, processing the strange and bloody victory. Her gaze turns back to the distant hill, her path now clear. The armored figure sinks beneath the surface, defeated. But a sudden sound makes Catherine whip around in alarm. From the murky depths, ghoulish figures begin to rise. She can only stare in utter disbelief at her terrible luck. An entire horde of the undead now stands between her and her goal. And the swamp itself seems to stir with a life of its own. A massive serpent slithers through the water, its eyes unseen. The water churns as more horrors emerge from below. With no other choice, she takes a step forward and begins a desperate sprint through the monster-infested waters. She pushes forward with everything she has. The ghoulish horde swarms around her, their screams echoing in the swamp. She cuts down the first one to reach her, and carves a path through the rest. But her eyes widen in sudden realization. As another monster lunges, she moves with impossible speed. Her blade becomes a blur, a whirlwind of deadly precision. She knows she shouldn't be this fast, this strong. It's the power of the name already taking hold. And with it, she carves a path through the sea of monsters. She finally reaches solid ground, exhausted from the endless fight. But she rises with a defiant roar, ready for whatever comes next. At the top of the hill, she sees her next challenge, and hopes this good twin is less trouble. She faces two silver-clad guards, asking if they're also here to kill her. They cross their halberds, blocking her path. She just hopes her soul is more original than an endless flood of guards. But a new voice tells her she doesn't need to fight them. She only needs to leave her weapon behind. Catherine scoffs at the idea of disarming herself in front of armed guards, but the woman in white insists she is unarmed and the guards will stay put. Catherine questions the woman's terms, unwilling to trust so easily, but her eyes narrow with a different kind of solution. She decides to disarm the guards the hard way. With a smug grin, she declares herself weaponless just as requested. The woman in white can only stare at the two crumpled suits of armor. She finally relents, inviting Catherine to follow her inside. Catherine gives the fallen guards a cheerful wave goodbye. They step into a massive chamber, its walls lined with glowing portraits. She realizes with a shock that each one depicts a moment from her own life. Catherine can only stare, overwhelmed by the gallery of her past. The woman explains the gallery has empty frames for the rest of her life. Catherine asks what this version's complaint is, since the last one called her soft. But the guide explains they are both just voicing Catherine's own doubts. Catherine scoffs, sarcastically asking if the zombies were her fault too. Her guide explains the swamp was a reflection of her belief that nothing is easily won. Unimpressed, Catherine asks if they can just wrap up this part of the dream. But her guide explodes, demanding she take the fate of her soul seriously. Catherine calmly retorts that she would if any of this actually mattered. To her, this is just a chore to finish before she can move on with her life. A life, the guide reminds her, that will be spent as a villain for the Empire. Catherine insists this was always her plan and a name just makes it faster. But her guide warns that she doesn't grasp the true weight of serving evil, calling her a fool for her ignorance. She will be bound to evil's cause, but Catherine refuses to be a pawn. The guide reminds her of another law she was taught long ago. The laws of good, which command her to protect the innocent and uphold what is right. She realizes this is all just a very dramatic recruitment pitch for the other team. Her guide calls her naive for still believing that good will inevitably save the day. Back in reality, Catherine's mind races, remembering she's near the leader of the calamities, a man who has hunted down and ended more heroes than she can count. Catherine explains that being a hero simply doesn't work. They always try to liberate Callow, giving speeches about destiny before they're inevitably killed. And even if a hero survived, their rebellion would be crushed. The people who followed them would be scattered and broken. She sarcastically notes how righteous her head would look on a spike. Her guide explodes, asking if "it's too hard" is her only excuse. But Catherine is all for doing the right thing, as long as it isn't also the dumb thing. The guide insists this isn't a story, and that failure means real people will die for nothing. Catherine counters that her darker half was wrong. Killing isn't enough. The very system that allowed men like Kojo to rise to power. The guide claims Catherine believes that simply being good is enough. But Catherine roars back that doing nothing is worse than being evil. She doesn't need to be a good person to make a better world, and she's had quite enough of this internal debate. She ends the conversation by force, her decision finally made. And with that, Catherine's eyes snap open in the real world. She finds herself in a lavish room, far from the bloody banquet hall. A warm fire crackles nearby, a silent witness to her return. She lies there for a moment, processing the trial she just endured, and a slow, determined smile spreads across her face. And so Catherine Foundling officially claims her new title, Squire. She wakes up slowly, the events of the trial still fresh in her mind. A polite cough from the foot of the bed breaks the silence. She's startled to find a man in a red tunic watching over her. He apologizes for the intrusion, addressing her as Lady Foundling. She sarcastically notes that getting stabbed is a weird way to get a promotion. Her new attendant can only stand there in awkward silence. He informs her that Lord Black wishes to be notified of her awakening. Catherine dismisses him, still trying to process everything. The attendant asks if her new title means the ritual was a success. Catherine stands before a stained glass window, wrapped in a simple cloth. She looks at her reflection, asking herself if this is real. She stumbles forward, still weak from the ordeal. She pushes open a set of grand doors and steps into a new part of the residence. A small, determined smile plays on her lips. A voice notes how far she's come from her days as an orphan. Now dressed in fresh clothes, she dries her hair. Black casually remarks that her new attire suits her. But Catherine explodes, reminding him that he stabbed her. Black sits calmly, as if he didn't just have her run through. He admits to the stabbing, but only a little bit, and explains that since she's not bleeding from her eyes, the ritual was a success. Catherine is horrified to learn that was even on the table. She feels no different, but Black reveals she's only halfway there. She has competition for the name. He tells her to close her eyes to see her rivals. She reluctantly obeys, her mind drifting into darkness. In the void, a single silhouette takes shape, before dissolving into a splash of violent red, revealing 4 other figures, her rivals for the title of Squire. Black asks if she can sense her new rivals. Catherine confirms she can feel 3 of them, and a 4th presence that feels different. She wonders why she has this sudden connection to them. Black explains with a chilling smile that they all want her dead. Her eyes widen in shock at the news. Black rises from his chair, announcing that her lessons are about to begin. He looks down at her, ready to start her training. Catherine can only stare up at her new mentor. But her first lesson isn't on the training grounds, it's in a library, buried under a mountain of books. She lets out a groan of pure exhaustion. Black sits across from a very tired Catherine, the table piled high with books. She sarcastically asks if the books are for reading or for weapons. He dryly confirms her first guess and begins to lay out her new schedule. She'll be reading on a wide range of topics and mastering 5 languages. Her days will be filled with sword lessons, studying, and personal instruction from Black himself. She eagerly asks if this means she'll learn the secrets of her new name. But Catherine questions the curriculum, wondering why agriculture is on the list. Black reveals a surprising truth: he was raised on a farm. Catherine is stunned to learn that a calamity started out as a simple farmer. He explains the system of land ownership and price and the importance of the farmers. He explains the High Lords are second only to the Empress, which leads Catherine to ask why she doesn't just get rid of them. Black admits he once thought the same, but the Empress prefers to keep her enemies in sight. Catherine argues that with her power, the Empress should have nothing to fear. He turns, amused by her simplistic view of power. He reveals the High Lords can raise an army 3 times the size of the legions, and without their support, the Empress's authority is practically meaningless. He hands her another book, pleased that she's finally understanding the game. This, he tells her, is the world she has just entered, and she has a lot of catching up to do. Catherine's eyes widen as she absorbs the harsh truths of history. Suddenly, Black grabs a sack from a nearby pile. He tosses it to her without a word. He tells her to pack up, her true lesson is about to begin. As she gathers the books, she asks where they're headed. His answer, the Perrin Woods, strikes a chord of dread. She remembers the report they found the bandits from the convoy, and Black's final instruction is to bring her knife. But first, he says, she'll need a proper mount. Their destination, the old Callowan Royal Stables. Catherine admits she's never actually ridden a horse before. In fact, she's only ever been a stone's throw away, a suspiciously specific distance. She explains she was trying to get it to kick a guard siding with the horse, of course. Apparently, the guard had it coming. They continue on their way to the stables. She pushes open the heavy doors, stepping into the darkness. Her eyes flare as they adjust to the sudden change in light. She's shocked by how quickly her vision clears. Black explains that her new name has sharpened her senses, even granting her night vision. It's another reminder of the strange new world she's entered. They walk through the stables, past rows of powerful war horses. Catherine suggests a gelding, hoping for an easy first ride. But Black assures her the horse's temperament won't be an issue. His gauntleted hand unlatches a stall at the far end of the stable. He opens the door, revealing the mount he has chosen for her. Catherine peers inside, her expression shifting to one of concern. Lying on the straw is a sickly horse, a bedlam charger. Black explains the stable master has given it little chance of survival. The poor creature is suffering from a painful case of pigeon fever. Catherine immediately asks if she's expected to nurse it back to health. But Black's instruction is simple and brutal. She's going to kill it. Catherine is stunned, only to be told they will then raise it from the dead. She immediately recognizes the dark magic for what it is. Necromancy. Black confirms her fears, reminding her that this is the side she chose. Her internal monologue is short, sweet, and to the point. She complains that he could have given her a softer introduction to villainy, maybe start with some evil laughter, not jumping straight to raising the dead. But Black dismisses monologues as a waste of precious time. He then insists that this is the soft introduction. He explains it's like a craftsman felling a tree to build something new. He explains that a craftsman must carefully apply his energy to his work. But Catherine points out he's glossing over the part where she has to kill it first. Black frames it as a mercy, saving the creature from weeks of suffering. As she grips the dagger, he tells her not to use it. The blade is only a backup in case she can't access her new power. She's surprised to learn they'll be using her name, but he clarifies it's just a fragment. He reminds her she won't have full access until she's won the title, and that he will help. She asks if the process will be painful for the horse, but he assures her it won't be. With her resolve hardened, she asks what she needs to do. He tells her to place her hand on the horse, he'll do the heavy lifting. His hand on her shoulder, he guides her through the grim task. She can feel the horse's life fading, its heartbeat barely a whisper, a faint, struggling pulse against the encroaching darkness. Catherine's breath catches in her throat, the weight of the moment pressing down. Black's gauntlet remains on her shoulder, a silent, unyielding pressure. His eyes begin to glow with that familiar emerald light. He places his own hand over hers, channeling his power. A dark energy flows from their hands into the dying creature. And with one final beat, the horse's heart falls silent. Black then informs her that the truly difficult part is about to begin. The stable falls silent as they kneel over the lifeless body. In the darkness, a strange new energy begins to stir. A current of power flows through the horse's very bones, reknitting the sinews and reawakening the flesh. Catherine stares in shock as a spectral form rises behind her. Black explains this is the first step in her new education. She can feel it now, a connection to the creature's very essence, a sudden, profound understanding of life and death. She slowly lifts her hand from the horse's side, and on the straw, the creature's leg begins to twitch. The reanimated horse rises to its feet, and Black offers his approval. Catherine can only stare, a mix of shock and awe on her face. He tells her the newly risen creature will need a name. She decides on something simple and brutally honest. Her hand gently rests on the creature's cheek. She introduces her new mount, Zombie. Her first riding lesson begins in a wide, open paddock, but she struggles with the clumsy movements of her undead steed. His subordinate asks why he finally chose an apprentice after years of refusal. Black can only ponder the question, his reasons still his own. Sabah worries about the noble's reaction, but his companion couldn't care less. He admits politics aren't his thing, but warns Black of the Empress's expectations. Black calmly states that Catherine won't just meet them. His eyes gleam with an unshakable confidence. He declares that she will exceed them as Catherine masters her undead steed. Elsewhere, in a lavish hall, a different kind of game is being played. A servant delivers a message to a noble lord. The man breaks the wax seal, revealing the contents within. He reads the message, his expression shifting with intrigue, and a slow, predatory smile spreads across his face. His servant asks if the news is to his liking. The noble rolls the message with a decisive snap. He orders his horse and traveling clothes prepared at once. It seems the bandits in the woods have found a valuable treasure. Meanwhile, at a crossroads somewhere in Callow, a different journey is already well underway. Catherine rides with the others, practicing a harsh, guttural language. Sabah teases her struggles, and she complains about the difficult pronunciation. But Black chimes in, noting its intimidating effect on the battlefield. Catherine reflects that these conversations are slowly chipping away at her awe of the calamities. She admits they're powerful, stone-cold killers. But seeing the Black Knight roast a rabbit makes the legend seem almost human. She reminds herself not to get distracted by her studies. She groans, wondering if there's an end to all this reading. Back in the library, she questions how she can memorize all this and learn to fight. Black tells her she has an advantage most students lack. She warns him not to say it's because he's a talented teacher. He clarifies that he's referring to her 3 aspects, though he is an advantage. He explains they are the main abilities of her name, which follow a common theme. She sarcastically asks if one of her new powers is super speed reading. He reveals her first aspect is Learn, a common power for squires. She then asks about his own aspects, the powers of the Black Knight. He reveals one of them is Conquer, a fitting name for his role. The more he embodies his name, the more powerful he becomes. He explains that for every evil aspect, there is a heroic counterpart, a lesson she will need to remember on her new path. Days later, they make camp in the Perrin Woods. Her undead mount stands silently beside the others. The soldiers work efficiently, setting up for the night. A small, temporary outpost in the heart of the wilderness. Catherine tends to her undead mount. She asks Saba about his own massive horse, which was specially bred for him. She then glances back at her own steed, wondering if it even qualifies as a horse anymore. Black calls them over, interrupting their conversation. He informs them they'll be leaving the road tomorrow to avoid unwanted attention. When asked why, he explains it's a simple way to reduce assassination attempts. Catherine nearly chokes on her water at the casual mention of assassins. She asks in disbelief if he's had to deal with more than one. His subordinate scoffs, saying it's been a quiet 5 months. But Black clarifies that this time, it's her own people he wants to avoid. Catherine realizes they're here to find the Empress's stolen gold. She asks how they'll find the bandits in a forest this large. Black's subordinate explains the bandits have dozens of horses to feed, and the only village with enough oats to supply them is Grenfork. She sarcastically asks if his secret plan was just asking about horse feed, but Black denies it, pointing to his actual source of information. He reveals that his spy mistress Scribe sent the agents. He adds that Catherine has already met her, as a hooded figure appears at her side. The woman lowers her hood, revealing herself as Scribe, the spy mistress of the Calamities. Catherine can only stare, recognizing the woman from the tavern. Catherine's mind flashes back to the inn, realizing they'd spoken over breakfast. Scribe explains that not all names are for fighting, which is why Catherine can't remember her. Even now, Catherine finds it impossible to recall the spy mistress's features. She swallows hard, unnerved by the subtle power of Scribe's name. The spy mistress clarifies that the bandits are more than they seem, they're mercenaries and rebels. Catherine connects the dots, asking if these foxtails were the ones Kojo hired. She explains that she knows the name it's taken from a legendary Calawan king. They're Calawan loyalists, an odd choice for a Précy governor to hire. Black reveals another complication. Someone else is trying to beat them to the prize. He names Baron Vernon Angler, one of the 2 greatest traitors in Calawan history. One is a commander far away, and the other is the Baron. The only living Calawan villain. She asks Scribe why the Baron is after the gold, assuming he was an ally. But Saba explains that the Baron's loyalty is fickle at best. He wears it like a hat, only when the weather suits him. His true ambition is to take Black's place as Governor General, and returning the stolen gold would certainly help his case with the Empress. So now 3 factions are all converging on the same treasure. Catherine can only comment on how chaotic the situation sounds. Saba looks her in the eye, asking if she's nervous. But Catherine just smiles, saying a little chaos is right up her alley. Black tosses her a sword, his approval clear. He tells her to get some rest, because her sword training begins in the morning. The next day, they stand in a makeshift training ground within the camp. Catherine stretches as her new instructor asks if she brought her weapon. She confirms she did, holding the simple blade. He notes the orphanage's bell insignia on the pommel. He tells her to take care of it, as it's goblin steel from the Imperial forges. She asks if it's better than dwarven work, but he scoffs at the idea. Catherine asks if he's here to teach her swordsmanship, but he flatly denies it, calling it a tame sport. He calls it a game of forms and rules, useless in a real fight. He recognizes her stance from the old Calawan Royal Guard. She asks if he has a problem with her learning from the enemy, but he just smiles, admitting they were fine soldiers. The goal, he explains, is to kill quickly and efficiently. Everything else is just a distraction from that simple truth. He tells her to focus on distance and footwork, now with a shield. He begins to instruct her on the proper way to brace herself. He demonstrates a powerful strike, which she barely blocks. He explains there are 2 ways to kill, the first being the thrust. He points out all the vulnerable spots where a single stab can end a fight. Catherine realizes with a jolt that he's using a live blade. He screams at her to keep her shield up at all times. She adjusts her stance, earning a brief nod of approval. The second method, he continues, is to hack at an opponent. He explains that the neck is a common and fatal weakness. He pulls back, admitting this is trickier than he thought, and with a single word, he tells her to begin. Catherine struggles against her instructor, the shield feeling heavy and awkward. Her strikes are clumsy, lacking the proper control. Even with her new senses, her timing is completely off. She's far too slow, and he deflects her blows with ease. But she grits her teeth, determined to master this new style. The training session ends with her flat on her back, completely exhausted. She can only lie there, catching her breath after the grueling lesson. Her instructor offers some rare encouragement, saying the first weeks are always the hardest. Though he warns her it will only get tougher once she's in full armor. But for someone used to winning fights, this level of frustration is a new kind of hell. The captain calls out to Black, asking if he has urgent business. She suggests they have a sparring match to show Catherine the goal of her training. Besides, she adds with a wink, it's been a while since they've had a proper fight. Black agrees with a confident smile, asking for the terms. The captain insists they keep their names out of it to avoid wrecking the landscape. Catherine asks Sabah if their spars tend to get messy. He recalls their last fight, which involved a toppled tower and a thrown statue. He tells her to watch closely, because she won't want to miss this. Scribe raises her hand, ready to begin the duel. The captain flashes a wild grin, while Black remains perfectly composed. Scribe's hand falls and the duel begins. The ground beneath the captain shatters as she launches forward. She soars through the air with impossible speed. Black moves to intercept, his own movements a blur. The captain brings her massive hammer down with devastating force. Catherine can only stare, wondering how she jumped so far in full plate. Saba notes that the captain must have been bored to start so aggressively. Catherine questions if they're breaking the no-names rule. But Saba explains their bodies are just permanently enhanced by their power. The two calamities become a whirlwind of steel and fury. The captain smirks, declaring the warm-up officially over. She leaps high into the air, ready to bring her hammer down, and the resulting impact shakes the entire clearing. Catherine and Saba watch the chaos unfold from a safe distance. Black parries her wild swing, his expression one of mild annoyance. He raises his shield just in time to block a devastating blow. The sheer force of the impact sends him sliding back across the dirt. The captain taunts him, suggesting he's getting slow in his old age. But Black retorts that she's getting a little too confident in hers. He rushes forward, his own counterattack a blur of steel. The captain's face is a mask of pure battle joy. But Black meets her hammer with his sword, stopping it cold. She dodges his follow-up, their movements impossibly fast. Steel grinds against steel in a shower of sparks. He ducks under another wild swing, and slides past her with practiced ease. He pivots, digging his heel into the dirt. Catherine can only watch as the two titans clash. Black smirks, asking if she's sure he's the one getting slower. The captain retorts that he can gloat after he finally beats Ranger. Catherine is left breathless, but her spirit is anything but broken. The days that follow are a blur of training and travel. Catherine pushes through the exhaustion, her resolve hardening. She sits atop her undead mount, surveying the camp, but her body aches from the constant strain of her new life. Her instructor asks if she's feeling a bit saddle sore, or perhaps just bruised from the dozens of blows she failed to block. She grumbles that this is far from the glorious training she imagined. Saba chimes in with his own brand of helpful advice, but Dooney quickly shuts down the unhelpful commentary. Inside the command tent, Black goes over the plan with his men. A voice calls out for one of the lieutenants, a woman named Afia. She steps out of the tent to find Black and Catherine waiting. The lieutenant pauses, her attention fixed on her commander. Removing her helm, she greets them both with formal respect. Black asks about her studies in healing magic with another captain. He praises her choice, but she reaffirms her long-term loyalty. Catherine observes the deep respect the soldiers have for their leader, but she also notes their casual, almost familial bond. Black then asks the lieutenant for a simple spell for himself and Catherine. The lieutenant begins to cast the spell, a soft light glowing in her hands. Catherine watches in confusion, wondering what's happening. She finally understands the loyalty his soldiers have for him. He asked for the spell for them both, a small gesture to spare her pride. She then asks how they'll enter the village without alerting the rebels. Black explains they can't avoid being seen, so they must be seen correctly. He reveals the 2nd Legion patrols this area regularly, so they'll disguise themselves as a routine patrol to avoid suspicion. Catherine asks if she can keep her hair instead of cutting it to regulation length, but Black calmly informs her that won't be necessary. She offers a quiet word of thanks, still processing his small act of kindness. But Black informs her she won't be joining them in Grenfork. Catherine is stunned by the sudden change of plans. She argues that there's no point in her being here if she's just going to be benched. He explains that neither Scribe nor the captain will be going either. It's a lesson in strategy that still rubs her the wrong way. She wonders why he'd make her an apprentice only to sideline her. She chose this path to make a difference, not to watch from afar. So she can only observe as the soldiers prepare to move out without her. Black and 40 of his elite guard march out, leaving her behind. The rest of the Blackguard are left to wait for their master's return, a task Catherine must also endure, much to her frustration. The captain, meanwhile, is taking his duties very seriously by napping, but Catherine's attention is suddenly drawn elsewhere. In a nearby field, she spots Scribe tending to some scarecrows. She watches as the spy mistress works, her curiosity piqued. Catherine decides to approach the mysterious woman. Scribe turns, stating that they are long overdue for a talk. Catherine points out that Scribe has been avoiding her until now. The spy mistress admits she needed to investigate Catherine more thoroughly. Catherine senses this conversation won't be a pleasant one. She tries to play it off, claiming her life is uninteresting. But the spy mistress isn't buying it. She explains that everything Catherine has ever done is now relevant. The fact that the position was offered to her is especially interesting. Scribe wonders what makes her so different from the other candidates. She begins to list the findings of her investigation, noting Catherine's connection to a former Royal Guard captain. Scribe points out her pattern of seeking out dangerous teachers. She lists every secret, from illegal texts to underground fighting. Catherine realizes the spy mistress has uncovered everything and asks why Scribe is so determined to confront her. Scribe turns away, her assessment simple and direct. Catherine is dangerous. The accusation hangs in the air, leaving Catherine stunned. But her shock quickly gives way to laughter. She mocks the idea, sarcastically thanking Scribe for the flattery. But the spy mistress warns her that ambition has blinded her to the truth. She asks if Catherine truly understands the consequences of her new position. By choosing her, Black has angered the most powerful nobles in the Empire. Scribe admits that even after learning everything, she still can't understand his choice. And Catherine finally understands Scribe's real problem is that she's been left out of the loop. Catherine realizes Scribe is worried that Black's choice could be a mistake. She lets out a sigh, admitting she doesn't know why he chose her either. She confesses that even now his actions are a mystery to her. He brought her all this way, only to tell her to sit on the sidelines. But she needs this chance to prove herself or this apprenticeship is a waste of time. Scribe turns away, a final warning on her lips. She tells Catherine to tread carefully for power is a finite thing. and every bit of power she gains is taken from someone else. But as she leaves, she offers a cryptic piece of advice Black never told her to stay. Catherine is left stunned, wondering what the spy mistress meant. Her eyes widen with a sudden, brilliant realization. A slow, mischievous smile spreads across her face. She turns on her heel without a second thought and begins sprinting away from the camp. She finds her instructor, Dooney, in the middle of his own training. She runs towards him, a desperate plan forming in her mind. He asks what she wants, surprised by her sudden appearance. Catherine catches her breath, a determined grin on her face. She looks him dead in the eye and makes a very unusual request. Meanwhile, in the misty woods, shouts echo as someone is spotted. The sounds of a frantic chase crash through the trees. Footsteps pound against the forest floor. It's Catherine, running for her life as her pursuers close in. Her own instructor, Dooney, leads the hunt, ordering his men after her. She pushes onward, gasping for breath but refusing to stop. But her foot snags on a gnarled root. She's sent tumbling through the undergrowth. She lands hard, her momentum completely broken. A brutal kick drives the air from her lungs. Dooney pins her to the ground, shouting that she's been caught as she cries for help. She complains about the kick, asking if he had to be so rough. But Dooney gives her a subtle wink while calling for rope. Catherine isn't finished with her performance, scraping her fist in the dirt. She throws a handful of it into another soldier's face and uses the brief distraction to scramble away. The soldiers are left to check on their blinded comrade. Catherine sprints deeper into the woods, her escape now complete. She ducks behind a fallen log, finally catching her breath. She peeks over the top, sarcastically noting her love for the forest. But all that screaming was for a reason to alert the foxtails to her presence. Dooney knows they can only pretend to chase her for so long. Catherine hides behind a log, hoping she won't have to camp out. She takes a deep breath, ready to start running again. But the sound of a footstep freezes her in place. A blade is suddenly pressed against her throat, and a gloved hand clamps over her mouth to stifle her scream. She's been ambushed by the very rebels she was looking for. Her captors scan the woods for any sign of her pursuers. A woman's voice warns her to stay quiet, or they'll all be found. Catherine trembles as she's pulled deeper into the shadows. The man explains their pursuers are heading south to the river. Catherine looks on, her plan having worked perfectly. The man notes they've found 2 foxtails for a low price. But Catherine demands to know who they are. The man puts a blade to her throat, stating they're the ones asking questions. His partner scolds him for his poor choice of words and for revealing his name. The woman introduces herself as Myrtle, assuring Catherine she's safe. Catherine immediately identifies them as partisans, the Callowan rebels. Myrtle confirms they are the foxtails and asks for her name in return. And Catherine's inner monologue confirms her mission is a success. She gives them a fake name, claiming to be a girl from Lore. She spins a tale of escaping the Empire, hoping to disappear in the woods. Myrtle presses her, asking why Imperial soldiers were chasing her. Catherine recognizes the tactic immediately. The classic good cop, bad cop routine. She begins her story, claiming her mother gave her a magical bracelet. A bracelet she tried to sell at the Hedges Guild to pay the new taxes. But the man cuts her off, revealing the guild is owned by the Carrion Lord. He asks if that's when the chase began. Catherine continues her lie, saying her uncle in the guard helped her escape. Myrtle correctly guesses she sold everything she had just to get here. The man asks about the bracelet, but Catherine claims she buried it somewhere safe. Myrtle tries to de-escalate, saying she was only curious about its origin. She explains her partner was a student at the Tower of Swans before the invasion. Catherine realizes he's a wizard, a remnant of the Old Kingdom, and knows she must be careful. She points out that they're close to the village, but the man warns that Grenfork is crawling with legionaries right now. Catherine nervously asks if she can stay with them for the night, but Myrtle warns they only take in fighters. The man adds that their captain would need a very good reason to let her stay longer, and Catherine's inner monologue confirms this was her plan all along, using the bracelet as bait. The man notes that such an item must be worth a fortune, and Catherine knows that rebels and bandits all share one thing, a love of gold. She puts on a show of gratitude, thanking them for their help. She tells them how much she appreciates their kindness, but her inner thoughts reveal a much colder truth. As they move deeper into the woods, away from the blackguard, her 2 captors grow comfortable enough to start chatting. She realizes they think she's the secret child of a noble, an assumption that helps sell her story and allows her to learn about them. She learns that Myrtle is from a family of hunters, from the old Duchy of Liesse. She recalls that Blake was a student at the Tower of Swans, a school of magic that met a bad end. She asks him what happened, believing all the wizards there had been killed. A dark memory flashes across Blake's face. He explains that the warlock happened and that the youngest apprentices were spared. Catherine realizes this means Blake isn't much of a wizard. She asks why their mages couldn't fight back against the calamities. Blake scoffs, calling the old masters fools for wanting a glorious battle. He explains that the other magic schools fell one by one with little resistance. Catherine presses him, asking what happened when the Empire finally arrived. He describes the warlock showing up with a small escort and simply walking the grounds. The masters of the tower believed the warlock would lay siege to them. They were confident in their ancient and powerful magical wards. They expected him to waste his strength against their walls, but he never attacked. Instead, he simply set 2 wards of his own and waited. A week later, the mages realized the air inside the tower was growing thin. They began to suffocate, trapped within their own fortress. The first ward stopped air from coming in, and the second protected the first. so the mages had to abandon their tower, desperately trying to break through his magic. The warlock simply watched as his legionaries took aim, and rained down a volley of arrows on the helpless wizards. The wizards were cut down without a chance to fight back. No magic, no glory, just the screams of dying men. Blake explains that once the war wizards fell, the survivors surrendered. Myrtle scoffs at their pride, calling them fools for not waiting for a better time. But Blake argues that some things are worth being a fool for. The two rebels walk on, their debate seemingly settled, but Catherine believes they are both wrong. If the wizards had surrendered, they would have lived, and their knowledge would have survived. But now only the magic of praise is left for anyone to learn. She's so lost in thought she walks right into Blake. Catherine looks up, confused by the sudden stop. They continue their journey deeper into the darkening woods. Suddenly, Myrtle puts her fingers to her lips and lets out a sharp whistle. The sound echoes through the trees as the sun begins to set. A rustling sound comes from the nearby bushes. A small, almost cartoonish fox pokes its head out, but a much larger fox emerges, padding right up to a startled Catherine. It leaps onto a nearby rock and curls up, its eyes glowing with an eerie intelligence. Catherine can only stare, completely baffled by this turn of events. And her shock turns to disbelief as the fox speaks, recognizing her two captors. The fox speaks, demanding payment for its services. Blake defends himself, saying he only forgot the mouse once. He tosses the offering into the air, and the fox happily devours its snack. Myrtle then introduces Catherine to their unusual ally. The fox finishes its meal with a decisive gulp. It then turns its attention to Catherine, noting the smell of horses. Myrtle quickly explains she hasn't washed since her ride. The fox sniffs the air again, confirming her story is true. Blake tells a very tense Catherine to relax. The fox deems them worthy and tells them to follow. It hops off the rock, leading them deeper into the forest. Catherine struggles to keep pace with the others. She finally asks what exactly their guide is. Blake explains it's a spirit of the woods, a deal made by their captain. He cuts the conversation short, saying that's all she needs to know. And so they follow their unusual guide through the treacherous forest. The spirit moves with an effortless grace, before disappearing into the dense undergrowth, leaving the three of them to struggle through the thorns on their own. Catherine struggles to push through the dense undergrowth. She finally catches her breath, the long journey taking its toll. But her exhaustion turns to shock as she emerges into a clearing. Before them stands a tree of impossible size, a fortress of ancient wood. She can only stare in awe as Blake explains this place is older than the kingdom itself. Catherine then asks why they still need the fox if they know the way. Myrtle complains that the spirit moves too fast for them to learn the path, ensuring his repeat business. She gestures them forward, promising the tree is just the beginning. The real marvel, she explains, is what's hidden inside. And so they venture into a dark passage between the massive roots. Catherine stumbles, her body aching from the long trek. But the sounds of a lively crowd echo from within. Her eyes widen in disbelief at what she sees. Inside the tree is a massive, hollowed-out city, a hidden sanctuary for the Caloan rebels. Myrtle proudly asks what she thinks of their home. She's then pushed forward to meet their leader, Captain Alden. The partisans murmur as she's led through the crowd. It's a lively, almost festive atmosphere for a secret base. She's brought to a tavern to wait for the captain. A friendly bartender offers the exhausted girl a meal. Myrtle leaves to find the captain, telling Catherine to eat up. Catherine sits alone, taking in the sights of the hidden rebel base. The bartender places a steaming bowl of stew in front of her. He calls it Hunter's Stew, a local favorite. She notes how many people are living in this secret city. The bartender admits their numbers were once greater, before recent losses. He suggests that she might be part of their new recruitment drive. Catherine then asks about the fox fur necklaces everyone wears. He explains it's for the spirit, and warns her not to say fox too loudly, lest the drunks start singing. Catherine confirms the song with a mouthful of stew, but the bartender notes that another guest asked the same thing. She pauses, her curiosity piqued by this new arrival. He explains a visitor from the south was sent by an old friend. Across the room, a man in fine armor is holding court. He turns his head, his profile catching the dim light, and a wide, unsettling smile spreads across his face. A sudden chill runs down Catherine's spine. Her inner thoughts describe him as handsome, but inexplicably wrong, as if a deep hidden evil is seeping out from under his skin. The bartender excuses himself, leaving Catherine in the company of the strange noble. The man, Sir Vernon, offers a smile that does little to put her at ease. As the bartender walks away, Catherine is left alone with her new, unsettling companion. She flinches as he moves, his very presence setting her on edge. Vernon admits that finding her here was an unexpected development. A heavy pressure descends upon her, and she struggles to understand what he means. He suggests a privacy spell, and she feels the unmistakable weight of an evil name. This is Baron Vernon Angler, the very traitor Black had warned her about. But their tense introduction is suddenly interrupted by a boisterous shout. It's Myrtle, who drunkenly points out that the Baron's foxtail is getting drenched. Myrtle flashes a wide, drunken grin. She leaps onto a table, shouting the lyrics to a rowdy song. The entire tavern erupts into a chaotic sing-along. Vernon uses the noise to ensure their conversation remains private. Catherine recognizes his name. Surprised the rebels fell for his act, he warns her that if these people knew her true identity, she would not survive their wrath. She realizes the rival Black warned her about is already here, one of the two men her people hate the most. The Baron challenges her, sensing her own martial name. Catherine realizes she's revealed far too much. Vernon clarifies his threat is not one of violence, but of mutual exposure. She tries to deny it, but he presses on, sensing her deception. He explains there's only one reason to hide a name here. It's bound to prize. She's been caught, and her attempt to deflect is weak. He begins to ponder which of the calamities she could possibly serve. It can't be the warlock, who already has an apprentice, nor the captain, who has no time for a pupil. The assassin has no interest in taking on a student. Her violent nature rules out Scribe, and the ranger's students stay far from Callow. And by process of elimination, that leaves only one. He realizes she must be the squire to the Black Knight himself. Catherine's hand clenches, stunned by how quickly he solved the puzzle. But she knows he's just fishing, trying to get her to confirm his theory. She denies any connection, claiming the rebels wouldn't take in someone truly evil. But Vernon scoffs, reminding her, these aren't bandits, they're rebels. He laments that this is not the Callow he once knew, where such distinctions mattered. Now the people are desperate enough to rally behind any named figure they can find. Catherine argues things aren't worse now, but he says that's a truth that haunts the older generation. He knows her generation is getting used to imperial rule, a fact that seems to please him. He argues that the calamities are monsters, but their rule has actually benefited most of Callow. Catherine clenches her fist, hating that she knows he's right about the economy. But with men like him in charge, life for the common folk is still in the gutter. She challenges him, asking why any of this matters to a man who already chose his side. The Baron retorts that the conquest was already decided, and accepting reality is not treason. He adds with a smirk that the other nobles knelt eventually, just not as gracefully as he did. She thinks of the great houses of old, realizing he's been a ruling noble her entire life. She asks if his betrayal was worth it, now that he knows he could have kept his title anyway. The question enrages him, and he grabs her, shouting that she knows nothing of sacrifice. He pauses, his eyes narrowing with a cold, simmering fury. He suggests that perhaps she'll be the one to break the trend. But Catherine knows he's just trying to control the conversation again. She's already seen his anger, and knows he's not as composed as he seems. The Baron begins to explain, claiming most Callowan named are useless. He mentions the blacksmith who simply fled into exile, and the scholar who was driven mad by the conquest. He even mentions a thief who has been ignoring his messages. Catherine is surprised, having only heard of the first two. He smirks, claiming there are more than Black would ever tell her. But she knows he has an angle, and it's definitely not kindness. He calls it a courtesy from one peer to another. Catherine questions his logic, reminding him she serves the Black Knight. As the tavern noise continues, Vernon leans in closer. He lowers his voice, a conspiratorial whisper in her ear. He realizes they must both be after the same prize, the stolen gold. Her eyes narrow as she processes this new, dangerous alliance. But Vernon clarifies that splitting the treasure isn't his true goal. He leads her up a flight of stairs, away from the prying eyes of the rebels. Catherine understands his game. It's not about the gold, but about who gets the credit. He turns to her on the balcony, suggesting she can help him with his plan. He suggests his plan for the gold could benefit her instead. He wants her to confirm which artifacts were stolen from the royal vaults. She questions his motives, asking why he cares about old relics. His eyes gleam as he reveals his true target, the Doom Bells. Catherine is stunned, arguing that the bells were melted down long ago. But the Baron scoffs, calling common knowledge a banner for ignorance. Catherine believes she can get the information from Black, and Vernon senses an agreement. She asks how they would execute this plan. She weighs the offer, finding it consistent with the Baron's character. Convinced by his sincerity, she accepts the deal. Secrets for gold. The Baron flashes a self-satisfied grin, their dangerous pact sealed. He suggests they part ways to avoid suspicion, arranging a later meeting. Catherine watches him leave, the rowdy tavern song echoing from below. She remains on the balcony, her mind racing as the noise fades. She knows with absolute certainty that he has no intention of honoring their deal. She remembers the flash of anger in his eyes, a glimpse of his wounded pride. He's far too arrogant to let some upstart girl claim his prize, which means he's not really here for the Empress's gold. Her eyes narrow as the truth of the situation begins to dawn on her. It's time to find out what Baron Vernon Angler is truly planning. And if his goal happens to align with hers well, what's a little treachery between villains? She sits alone in the tavern, observing her surroundings. She's already gotten a sense of the hideout's layout. One tunnel leads to the latrines, an unlikely place for treasure. Another leads to the stables, and a third to a water source. But none of them seem like the right place to hide a fortune. As for the higher levels of the tree, most of the rooms are just small living quarters. Far too small to hold the Empress's stolen taxes. And that strange mill chamber was just that strange. That leaves one last tunnel, but it's completely unguarded. Her thoughts are cut short as Myrtle calls out her assumed name. The rebel approaches, waving from across the tavern. She makes her way over to Catherine's table. Myrtle asks if she's eaten, and Catherine confirms she's ready to meet the captain. With a nod, Myrtle agrees to take her now. Catherine follows her guide through the hidden city. Myrtle explains that the base is larger than it seems. As they arrive before a massive carved door, she knocks and a voice from within grants them entry. Myrtle pushes open the door, revealing the captain's quarters. Inside, a man with kind eyes sits waiting for them. He offers a warm smile, welcoming the newcomer. Myrtle introduces him as Sir Alden Goodwin, a former knight of Callow. Catherine plays her part, thanking him for the sanctuary. The captain gets right to the point, asking about the bracelet. She confirms the story, sticking to her carefully crafted lie. Alden offers to help her retrieve the valuable item, but he explains that if she wants to stay, she must learn to fight. Catherine eagerly agrees, her infiltration a complete success. He explains that until she's trained, she'll be a guest, which means she has to pay for her stay. Myrtle suggests they could sell the bracelet for her and use the coin to cover her expenses. Catherine realizes they're rebels, but also bandits, and agrees to the arrangement. Alden is pleased, saying he'll have Blake appraise the item to see what it's worth. He adds that Blake has a good eye for magic, even finding an enchanted sword for him. Catherine feigns surprise, asking if it's a real magic sword. And in that moment, she realizes what the Baron is truly after. A wicked smile spreads across her face. She can't wait to steal it from him. Alden draws the blade, admiring its fine craftsmanship. It never needs sharpening and can see through illusions. But Alden explains his sword can do much more than that. As Catherine recalls, she can't yet sense such power. Her mind flashes back to a lesson with Black, who explained that what matters is not the truth of a story, but the belief in it. Catherine argued that for Callow, the legends were real, like the first king who drew a sword from a stone. She explained that every Callowan knows the stories of the legendary swords. The Sword of Kings, Covenant, and the blades known as Lovelorn and Duty. But Black countered that the first king never actually ruled a united Callow. She insisted the sword was real, but he suggested its legend was exaggerated over time. Catherine was confused, believing all enchanted items were artifacts. But Black explained that while artifacts are enchanted, not all enchanted items are true artifacts. He then prepared to offer her a simple analogy. He explains that a mage can enchant a weapon, but magic, like all things, wears down. An enchantment will eventually fade, rendering the weapon useless. So for a legendary blade to last for centuries, it would have to be different. Artifacts, he reveals, defy this law of decay, but no one knows exactly how. Catherine knows he has his own theory on the matter. He asks her to consider the stories told about legendary weapons, and suggests that a story, told enough times, can wear a groove into reality itself. Back in the present, Catherine realizes Alden's sword is more powerful than he knows. Myrtle asks what she thinks, and Catherine can only call it beautiful. But now that she knows what the Baron is after, only one question remains: how she's going to steal it from right under his nose. But her scheming is cut short by a sudden, violent interruption. The doors to the chamber slam shut with a deafening thud, and a massive, jagged blade pierces through the wood, embedding itself in the floor. The captain and Myrtle wonder if their hidden base is under attack. But Catherine knows with chilling certainty who is behind this. She recognizes the power of one of the Baron's aspects at work. Just then, the young wizard Blake falls from an opening in the ceiling. He's immediately set upon by another rebel, his face twisted with rage. The man ends Blake's life, screaming that he deserved it for laughing behind his back. Another rebel tries to restrain the killer, who screams in a blind rage. He's quickly knocked unconscious with a sharp blow to the head. Myrtle catches the man, realizing there's no time to figure out what's happening. As screams echo from outside, the three of them cautiously peek out the door. They rush out, only to see Alden and Myrtle now fighting each other. The entire rebel base has descended into a bloody, chaotic free-for-all. Friends and comrades lie fallen, victims of the sudden madness. Catherine clutches her head, overwhelmed by the sheer insanity of it all. Alden stands in the middle of the carnage, noting they were all allies just moments ago. Catherine shoves another man aside, horrified by the senseless violence. The rebels have turned on each other like mad hounds. Myrtle rushes through the chaos, trying to make sense of it all. Alden desperately tries to shake one of his men back to his senses. For a moment, the spell seems to break, as the man recognizes his captain. But the Baron simply watches, casually enjoying the carnage he's created. Catherine realizes this is his plan to have them all kill each other. He'll simply walk away with the sword and the gold when it's over, and she knows with a sickening certainty that it's going to work. There are too few rebels with the will to resist his maddening influence. As she dodges another attack, she wonders what she can possibly do. She kicks another rebel aside, her mind racing for a way to stop this. She glances around the chaos, searching for an opening. Her mind flashes back to the camp, 3 factions all after the same prize. She remembers calling the situation chaotic, and Sabah asking if she was nervous. She recalls her own confident smile, completely unfazed by the danger. Back in the present, she realizes a little chaos is exactly what she needs as another rebel turns on her. She ends his attack with a single, brutal strike. Standing over him, she proves that chaos is right up her alley. The rebel falls, his attack cut short permanently. Catherine stands over him, noting that's one problem solved. But now she has to deal with the rest of the enraged mob. She flinches, bracing for the next wave of attacks. Below, Baron Vernon Angler looks up in disbelief. His face contorts with rage as he demands to know what she's doing. Catherine smirks, declaring their little deal is officially over. But another rebel lunges at her from behind, screaming in fury. She pivots, meeting his charge with a brutal counter. And with cold precision, she ends his assault for good. She stands over the fallen rebel, needing a way out of this bloody mess. The entire common room is a chaotic brawl, a desperate scrap for survival. She knows the tunnel leading out to the woods is nothing but a trap. If it were just the foxtails, she could easily make a run for it. But she knows she can't shake Baron Vernon Angler by fleeing into the forest. She needs a way to win that doesn't involve fighting every single person here, because she knows a direct confrontation would be a death sentence. A terrible idea forms, but it's the best odds she's got. She stands at the top of the stairs, baiting the mob to come closer, and the enraged rebels take the bait, charging right at her. She grabs the nearest rebel and sends him flying over the railing. But another one grabs her from behind, trying to end the fight. She uses his own momentum to flip him over her shoulder, sending him crashing into the mob below. She lands with a snarl, the adrenaline surging through her. But her eyes widen as she realizes she's still surrounded. Two more rebels charge up the stairs, their faces twisted with rage. She turns and flees, leading them deeper into the tavern. She kicks a heavy sack into one of her pursuers, and continues her brutal fight through the maddened crowd. She smashes a support beam with the pommel of her sword, and rips a burning torch from its sconce on the wall. Her terrible plan is simple. Burn the entire place down. The Baron screams for her to stop, and she savors the fear in his voice. She runs with the torch, his panic music to her ears. A rebel tries to intercept her with a spear, but she's already launched the torch at a hanging lantern. The glass shatters, spilling oil and flame across the room. She then kicks over a brazier because why not add to the chaos? With the tavern now burning, she turns to face the mob. She vaults over a railing, using a spear to propel herself forward. She lands and swings her sword, clearing a path through the chaos. She groans, wishing there was a better place to fight than a burning tavern. She continues her brutal assault on the maddened rebels, delivering a powerful kick to another attacker, but she's quickly overpowered, pinned down by another enraged partisan. With a furious scream, she raises her blade to fight back. Suddenly, one of her attackers is sent flying by an unseen force. She looks at her sword, realizing it has a magical kick to it. Captain Alden appears, ordering one of his people to stop this foolishness. He demands she return the sword that is rightfully his, but Catherine sends a heavy cauldron crashing down on them. She covers her mouth, her next objective already in mind. The rebels give chase as she vaults over the railing, and with a desperate leap, she continues her escape. She races up the stairs, the mob hot on her heels. Grabbing another torch from the wall, she tosses it into a nearby room to spread the flames. She looks back, thinking the odds are a little more even now, and continues her desperate run through the burning hideout. She pivots on her heel, ready for the next wave. A bloody smile spreads across her face as she decides to thin the herd. But from the top of the stairs, the Baron watches her every move. His face is a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Their blades meet in a shower of sparks. She finds herself facing another rebel who swings in on a rope, but her blade finds its mark, slicing through the thick cord. The rope frays and snaps under the strain, sending the man plummeting towards the ground below. Catherine can only watch, noting his unfortunate turn of luck. She pins another attacker down with a final brutal stomp. She stands over him, calmly counting down the remaining threats. The rest of the mob charges up the stairs, screaming for her head. But Catherine just flashes a sarcastic smile, completely unfazed. And with a sudden lunge, she ends the lead attacker's charge for good. She leaps over the fallen rebel to face the next wave. She lands with a steady stance, her resolve unshaken. The narrow stairway becomes a whirlwind of desperate combat. But the rebels' attacks are clumsy and uncoordinated. Their rage makes them a danger even to each other. She cuts through another attacker with brutal efficiency. The man's rage is cut short by her cold steel. Her eyes are locked on her next target, completely focused. The rebel stares in disbelief as the blow lands. She lets him fall, already moving on to the next threat. With a powerful leap, she flips backward off the landing. But she lands awkwardly, the impact jarring her to the bone. The Baron watches from above, a silent, menacing figure. Catherine glares up at him, refusing to stay down. Suddenly, the world changes, and she's running up an endless staircase as a voice calls out a name. She sprints up the long staircase, the chaos raging below. Her eyes are fixed on the dark passage at the top. She knows only 5 rebels remain, but the Baron is just biding his time. He's letting them wear her down to empty her bag of tricks, like a hunter sending his hounds to run down their prey. But a confident smile reveals she has a few tricks left. The rebels hesitate, one of them pleading for her to stop. But his rage returns, accusing her of ending their captain. Catherine screams back that she never had a choice. She points to the true villain, claiming the Baron forced her hand. The rebel tries to justify his actions, blaming the Baron's influence. But his words are lost in the haze of madness. Another partisan screams at them to ignore her lies. But the seeds of doubt have already been planted. The Baron decides he's grown tired of this little game. The remaining rebels give Catherine a simple choice, the sword or her life. But their rage is quickly redirected by the Baron's power. He grabs one of the men, his patience finally gone, and with a single word, he unleashes a torrent of flame. He uses his own man as a weapon, sending him flying into the others. The last rebel falls, leaving Catherine alone on the stairs. The enchanted sword in her hand begins to glow with a strange power. She turns to face the final partisan, who is still trapped in a haze of rage. But his eyes are filled with terror, fighting a war within himself. With no time to waste, she sprints down the dark passage. She enters the strange mill chamber she saw earlier. She crawls to the edge, looking for a way out. She realizes this is her only escape if she can play her cards right. But her path is blocked by a furious Baron Vernon Angler. Catherine smiles, realizing he was never after the gold but the sword she now holds. He gives her one last warning to hand over the sword. But Catherine calls his bluff, knowing he'd never leave a witness. She points out that his little visit here could be seen as treason. He dares her to run, confident she has no way out. But Catherine has considered that option, and decides to try something else first. The Baron can only watch, completely baffled by her move. She realizes this isn't just a magic sword, it's a much bigger prize. He screams that it's a blade that hides its power until it senses evil. And in that moment, Catherine understands its true nature. It's the story of a mysterious stranger arriving at a wicked noble's gate. He would pose as a guest, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, then reveal himself as the lost prince and save the people of Callow. And Catherine realizes with dawning horror that this is that sword duty. The legendary blade of princes, now clutched in her bloody hands. The Baron stands before her, his true prize finally within reach. He asks if she has any idea how long he's been searching for it, how many lives he's ended, how many bargains he's struck. He reveals his quest has lasted for 10 long years, a decade spent hunting for the very blade she now holds. He explains that of the 3 legendary swords, duty is the only one left to find. And now he takes a step towards Catherine, ready to claim his prize. He continues his story, his voice filled with a decade of obsession. His eyes are wide with a manic, unsettling glee. The sword was last seen at the fields of Streges, wielded by the prince himself. But after the prince fell in battle, a loyal soldier fled with the blade before the Empire could seize it. The Baron searched every vault and secret passage for years, only to discover it had somehow fallen into the hands of Governor Kojo, tucked into his sash like a common dagger. He laughs, revealing Kojo mistook the blade for a simple trinket, and tossed one of Callow's greatest treasures aside. Catherine can only stare at the legendary sword in her hands. She tells him the blade will never accept a villain like him, but he argues that as a Callowan villain, he might be an exception. Suddenly he freezes, realizing his mistake. But it's too late, he's already said too much. She understands now he doesn't want the sword for its power, but for what it represents. It's a symbol of the right to rule Callow, a story her people believe in, a story powerful enough to make them follow even a traitor like him. Catherine lets out a small, knowing chuckle. The Baron admits she got him to monologue, calling it impressive, had she not just signed her own death warrant by doing so. But Catherine just smiles, saying it's impressive even if it gets her killed. His face remains grim, and she notes he really is a villain. He confirms that her end is now without a doubt. The chains of the mill begin to shudder as their standoff reaches its peak. Catherine grins, finally ready for the fight she's been waiting for. The Baron's eyes narrow, his patience completely exhausted, and he takes a single decisive step forward. He lunges forward, but Catherine meets his blade with a furious block. She swings the legendary sword, its light cutting through the gloom. The Baron parries, his eyes wide with surprise at her strength. She asks if he really thought she set this fire on a whim. As the chamber begins to collapse around them, she explains that while the tree is hidden, a column of smoke is not. The Baron can only stare, confused by her words, until the terrible truth finally dawns on him. Because a signal like that can be seen by anyone, including the Blackguard, he can only admit that her plan was clever. She reminds him of his offer to let her run, and decides to return the favor. She plants the legendary sword into the ground, and the Baron accepts her challenge with a grim nod. He draws his own blade, vowing not to leave empty-handed. She notes that everyone, hero or villain, is always looking backward. But he claims to have seen the conquest firsthand, prompting Catherine to scream that he lost that war. A memory of defeat flashes by, a reminder that they all did. And as long as they pretend things can go back, they'll just keep losing. She hurls the legendary blade forward, letting it spin through the air towards the millstone. It lands with a resounding clang, a challenge from a bygone age. She tells the Baron his past is right there for the taking. But she has one last move, her hand gripping a heavy lever. The Baron's eyes widen in sudden, dawning horror. The chains holding the massive stone begin to groan under the strain. He screams at her to stop, but it's already too late. Catherine declares that the war is over now, they must change or die. And with a final, desperate pull, she sends the entire mechanism crashing down. The heavy chains rattle and groan under the sudden strain. The massive millstone whips through the air as it plummets. It crashes down with a deafening bang, shattering on the floor. The legendary sword duty is now embedded in the broken stone, but the blade begins to glow with an impossible, blinding light. The entire chamber is bathed in its radiant, destructive power. A final, silent challenge passes between the two Callowan villains. Outside, the ancient tree stands as a silent monument. Before a massive explosion of light erupts from its base, a beacon of pure energy tears through the night sky. The story flashes back to an earlier time. As a group of soldiers marches through the woods, they sing a rowdy song of rebellion full of confidence. A small army of partisans, ready for a fight. But their leader seems less than thrilled with the attention. He's the pretty knight they sing of, their own champion. A lieutenant tries to warn him, but he's already aware of the observers. She asks if they should engage the unseen enemy, but he tells her to stand down. Their mission is to be seen. The lieutenant salutes, accepting her commander's orders. The commander flashes a disarming smile. Their patrol arrives at the village of Grenfork, ready to ask a few questions. Inside, a local man wrings his hands nervously. The commander reviews the village's tax records. He asks the man to confirm the payment, who stammers out a yes. The commander then asks about recent reports of bandits in the area. The man denies seeing anything, with a smile that's not fooling anyone. The commander's eyes narrow, sensing the lie, but he plays along, saying everything seems to be in order. The villager bows in relief as the commander turns to leave. The villager can only swallow his fear. Black points out a small inconsistency in the records. The village paid in gold this year, not grain. And despite a bountiful harvest, that grain is nowhere to be found. The man stammers that they sold it, but Black isn't buying the story. He leans in, demanding to know who the buyers were just as a soldier interrupts. The lieutenant reports that their target is on the move. She's heading deeper into the woods, moving with a confidence that suggests a guide. Black orders his men to gather, ready to rendezvous with the others. He tells the terrified villager that their chat will have to wait. Black explains that their cat has flushed out the fox. They arrive at the source of the signal, the massive rebel tree. Saba can only stare at the impossible sight. Dooney wonders how they could have missed something so enormous. Scribe explains the scent of fey magic kept it hidden. A soldier reports the Blackguard have the tree surrounded, but an ancient ward blocks their path. A glowing stone tablet protects the entrance, a barrier that will be difficult to break. Scribe notes that brute force would be too loud, a risk with Catherine still inside. Her subordinates can only wait for the order. But suddenly, the sounds of battle erupt from within the tree. Dooney realizes their true target has arrived as Saba suggests they may need to unleash the beast. Dooney agrees, saying their new squire needs saving, but Saba seems to have his doubts. His confidence is met with Dooney's utter confusion, a confusion that quickly turns into roaring laughter. He declares they should get moving before the youngsters have all the fun. But Black simply sits back with a confident, knowing smirk. Meanwhile, the remaining rebels wonder about the chaos inside. Their questions are cut short by a well-placed arrow. The survivor looks up to see the Blackguard scaling the entrance. He can only scream a warning as the Prazy forces attack. The Blackguards stand ready as a deep rumbling shakes the ground. From the earth, a monstrous form begins to emerge. A massive werewolf erupts from below with a deafening roar. It immediately begins to tear through the assembled soldiers. The beast smashes through the tree's entrance with brutal force. It towers over the remaining soldiers, a terrifying new player in this game. Its jaws snap shut, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Inside, the battle between the Blackguard and the rebels rages on. But the Prazy forces have brought their own mages to the fight, and the rebels are cut down with ruthless, practiced efficiency. A Blackguard soldier braces for impact, his shield already damaged. But the rebels fight with a desperate fury, cutting down their foes. Dooney looks up, his face a mask of shock and concern. He screams out a name, his voice lost in the chaos. He spotted Catherine lying motionless amidst the rubble. He orders his men to get to the squire at all costs. But her eyes suddenly snap open, her fight not yet over. The chamber continues to collapse around her. She struggles to rise, buried in the wreckage of her own making. Dooney's voice echoes again, a desperate plea to save their new apprentice. Her world is a blur of pain and darkness. But her eyes snap open. The fight far from over. She struggles to rise from the wreckage of the mill. Her head pounds from the force of the explosion. But Baron Vernon Angler is already claiming his prize. The legendary sword, Duty, now dripping with his own blood. He raises it high with a triumphant roar. Catherine can only grit her teeth, her body refusing to move. She watches him from the ground, seemingly defeated. But a wicked smile spreads across her face as she mocks his victory. He admits that she's going to be a lot of trouble. He stands over her, ready to end this once and for all. But a shout echoes through the chamber as her allies finally arrive. The Blackguard rush in, ordered to protect their new squire. Catherine looks up, bloodied but far from broken. A small, defiant smile plays on her lips. The Baron realizes his window has closed, promising they'll meet again. But Catherine can't resist a parting shot, offering him a second beating. She knows she should keep quiet, but never misses a chance to mouth off. And with that, the Baron makes a hasty retreat. He leaps away, disappearing into the darkness. Dooney helps Catherine up, who grins through the blood, saying everyone lost. But she lost the least, which is basically the same as winning. Her instructor is surprised she managed to chase him off. He explains that Black is waiting outside the encirclement. So the Baron only ran because a bigger fish was nearby. But as Dooney offers to get her help, she holds up a hand. She tells him there's something she needs to get first. Later, cloaked and healed, she looks back at the burning forest. Black waits for her, sitting patiently before a massive tree. Catherine asks if all the captured rebels are going to die. Black confirms their fate, a grim warning to all who defy the tower. He adds that the village of Grenfork will also pay a heavy price. Catherine argues that he could show mercy now that the gold is back. But Black hears her plea as a request for a favor. He asks what she's done to earn such a boon. Catherine looks down, the weight of his question settling in. She explains the Baron was never after the gold and she found his true prize. Black turns to her, a curious smile on his face. She reveals the target. Duty, the legendary sword of princes. Black agrees it's a worthy prize, a symbol powerful enough to rally a kingdom. Catherine confirms it was the Baron's only true goal. Black then asks the most important question, did he get it? She admits that he did, but only the blade. She drops the hilt of her own sword, revealing what she kept. Black's expression hardens as he asks if that's enough. Catherine worries that maybe the Baron still won. But a slow, wicked smile spreads across Black's face, and he erupts into a fit of triumphant laughter, leaving Catherine completely baffled by his sudden good mood. He mocks the absent Baron's misfortune, relishing the fact that Vernon's plans never seem to work out. He then turns to Catherine, telling her the favor is hers to claim. Her mind races with the possibilities: enchanted armor, forbidden knowledge, or even gold. But she knows that asking for too much could have dire consequences. There's so much she needs, so many secrets she wants to learn. Her mind flashes back to a simple bowl of stew from her past, a memory of the orphanage, a reminder of the people she left behind. With a frustrated sigh, she makes her decision. She asks him to spare the lives of the rebels and the people of Grenfork. Black warns her that this act of mercy won't make her hands clean. But Catherine retorts that at least she can choose whose blood is on them. After a long pause, he agrees to her request. She lets out a sigh of relief. Glad he saw her signal in time. But Black reveals they found her hours ago thanks to a tracking spell from his lieutenant. Catherine is stunned, asking if he planned this entire thing from the start. He just smirks, saying it's easy when you know what to look for. She argues that people aren't so predictable, but he reminds her she's not just a person anymore. He explains that some characters appear in hundreds of different stories, and across countless tales, the same roles serve the same purpose. He explains his own role as a slayer of heroes and a secret threat to the throne, and that Catherine's soul is perfectly suited for the role of squire. He describes her as a hot-headed apprentice destined to find trouble. She realizes he anticipated her actions to find the rebels' hideout, but she argues that if fate were so rigid, he'd already be dead. Black simply asks if rules don't exist to be broken. The scene shifts as their company continues its journey through the woods. They make camp, a small military outpost in the wilderness. Catherine tends to her horse, her daily routine now set. But she remains ever watchful, her gaze sharp and calculating. She recalls Black's words about cheating the rules of creation, a blasphemous idea, full of contempt for the gods above. And yet it's a lesson she's eager to learn. In the present, an officer orders a magical amulet sent to the warlock. Catherine and Scribe watch the exchange from a distance. Scribe notes her interest, startling the young squire. She admits it's her first time seeing a scrying spell. She realizes Black never mentioned the legendary sword to his officer. Scribe confirms he won't, explaining the difference in magical training, all while Black sits calmly, tending to his own mount. Catherine asks if their magical communication could have been intercepted. Scribe confirms it's always a risk, which is why they won't discuss the treasure Catherine found. Catherine smirks, teasing that being called a treasure is the nicest thing Scribe has said to her. But the spy mistress clarifies it's the only compliment she's actually earned. And with that, Scribe walks away, their conversation concluded. Catherine explains their next destination is Gravemouth, a fort Black calls Lectern. They meet up with a general's contingent, their journey now moving much faster. She also learned more about Baron Vernon Angler and the name of his maddening aspect. Foment. A power that takes time to work on a crowd, meaning she likely saw its full potential. But his name isn't the only threat. He also possesses a vault of powerful stolen treasures. He's an opportunist who ended his own father to claim a title, and she knows she must understand this new enemy. Her lessons resumed as soon as they were back on the road with a few adjustments. Her instructor notes her improvement with the shield, and Catherine can't help but feel a little proud of her progress. But Saba suggests a new, helpful routine to speed things up. A routine Catherine is not exactly thrilled about. A massive wooden hammer smashes against her shield. The force of the blow rattles her to the bone, and her instructor can only watch as the brutal lesson continues. Catherine nurses her cheek, feeling the aftermath of her improved training. Later, Scribe explains the politics of the Lord's Credent, a coalition of 3 noble houses who oppose the Empress. Catherine wonders why the Empress allows a rebel banner to fly in her cities. But Scribe clarifies their opposition is subtle, a push against reform. Catherine guesses they're too powerful to simply be executed. Scribe explains the Empress's own supporters are the stronger faction for now. The spy mistress brings her a bowl of stew, the lesson continuing. Catherine concludes they're not a real danger, just a political annoyance. But Scribe warns her they are a lion, waiting for the Empire to show weakness. And when the Empire shows weakness, the lion stops smiling. Scribe's final warning is clear. Catherine must not become that weakness. A few days later, they arrive at the infamous town of Gravemouth. But Catherine was looking forward to what was waiting for her inside. A full suit of plate armor commissioned by Black himself. It's a significant upgrade if she can ever figure out how to put it on. His orders were simple. Wear it at all times to get used to the weight. But she quickly learns that everything is harder in armor. Even drinking water becomes a challenge for creation's clumsiest idiot. And before long, they were on the move again, heading to a new destination. Their journey takes them to the gates of a new city. Their destination, the walled town of Summerholm. As they travel, the seasons change and summer gives way to autumn. Inside a tavern, a warm fire crackles in the hearth. Catherine learns that Scribe has been busy since they left, dealing with the fallout of Kojo's death. She asks if anyone is actually upset that the corrupt governor is gone. Her companion explains that back in Prayas, Kojo's rivals now sense weakness. He reveals their next stop is Ader, because another named figure, the alchemist, is getting involved. Catherine recalls that the alchemist is one of the few Pracy named not traveling with their company. The soldier calls her a mercenary, but prefers her to the necromancer, another powerful villain. Catherine asks why they've come to Summerholm. Black explains that trouble is brewing in the city, and where there's trouble, power always calls to power. Later that night, Catherine rests in her quarters. She lies awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind races with the events of the past few months. She finally closes her eyes, trying to find some peace. But in the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes appears. A shadowy figure emerges, a familiar presence. She can feel her rivals for the name of Squire, and they are getting closer. In his quarters, Black spends the late hours reading. His eyes, sharp and focused, scan the pages. A knock at the door breaks the silence, a servant offering food. Black looks up, his study interrupted by the intrusion. He grants the man entry, who waits patiently outside. The servant enters with a disarming, friendly smile. He carries a tray with a simple meal and a pitcher of wine, but a cloth-wrapped blade rests ominously on the board. The man explains he saw the light and thought to be of service. Black turns, his expression questioning the man's true motives. The man offers a nightcap, claiming he has trouble sleeping himself. He notes that a calamity isn't exactly a welcome guest in Callow, and with a snarl, he lunges forward to send Black on his way. But his attack is stopped cold, caught by an unyielding grip. Black thanks him for the hospitality and promises to return the favor. A sudden clang from outside jolts Catherine from her thoughts. She scrambles out of bed, her heart pounding in her chest. In the hallway, two figures are locked in a brutal struggle. She grabs her dagger and rushes out, demanding to know what's happening. Below, the entire common room is filled with armored soldiers. Saba informs her the assassins have already been caught, but he suggests she might want to put on her other boot first. Catherine retorts with some sarcasm of her own. Now fully armored, she joins the soldiers, ready to see what happened. In the courtyard, the aftermath of the failed assassination is clear. Black notes her arrival, and she confirms she's a light sleeper. He explains she's looking at one of the 10 men who tried to kill him tonight. A grim reminder that things could have gone much worse for the would-be killers. But the captured man remains defiant, promising his end is not yet here. Black agrees before asking Catherine how close the man actually got. Dooney explains that the captain handled 5 of them outside, while the others were caught by a magical alarm. Black reveals the assassin used a mask powered by blood magic, a specific type of sorcery from a Proceran school. He explains Procer is the largest nation on the continent, and a former ally of Callow that couldn't be trusted. Their last invasion took decades to push back. Catherine clenches her jaw, declaring them no friend of hers. Black identifies the man as a member of the Circle of Thorns. He explains they're Procer's spies and he's their top target. The captured man tries to shout a defiant motto through his pain, but her instructor finishes the line, clearly tired of hearing it. He leaves the man to Scribe's interrogation as Black walks away, and a sharp blow to the head finally silences the assassin. Catherine is troubled, questioning why Procer would use such dark magic. Black warns her not to underestimate their enemy's ruthlessness. She admits she never thought Procer would sacrifice an innocent Callowan, just for a failed attempt on Black's life. Later, on the road, Black explains 2 legions are stationed in Summerholm. He reveals their ominous nicknames, the Ironsides and the Regicides. Catherine asks how the legions earned their infamous reputations. The Regicides, he explains, delivered the final blow to the Callowan prince, a fact they commemorate with a slash of red paint. As for the Ironsides, they broke a charge of Callowan knights at Stregus. Catherine sarcastically congratulates them on their impressive achievements. But the soldier explains that before Black's reforms, the legions only fought with a massive numbers advantage and still lost half the time. Their only tactic was to throw bodies at the enemy until their charge stalled. A strategy, Catherine notes, that must have cost countless lives, making the name Ironsides all the more fitting. But there's more to it. The general of the 6th is an orc, and before the reforms, greenskins were forbidden from joining the legions. They were used as expendable shields, meant to break and flee before the enemy's charge. A grim history lesson that leaves Catherine staring into the distance. He explains that Istrid and her legion of orcs stood their ground against the Callowan knights, and for the first time in their history, they were not the ones to break. He then warns her not to focus too much on Istrid. The real threat is the other general, Sacker. Catherine asks if she's smart, but he corrects her. Sacker is clever, mean, and patient, a perfect balance to her partner's fury. So Catherine adds another name to her ever-growing list of people to avoid. And it seems she'll be meeting them very soon. They arrive at the gates of Summerholm, the eastern bastion of Callow. For centuries, it stood as the greatest obstacle to any invading army. Its position on the Huerta River made it nearly impenetrable. Only 2 people ever conquered it quickly, the first being the Dread Empress, and the second was Black himself, using goblin engineering to shatter its defenses. Now, the city is a stronghold for the very legions that conquered it. The streets are bustling, a vibrant and lively marketplace. It's a place where the people of Prace and Callow mingle more than anywhere else. Its position as a trade hub has made it one of the wealthiest cities in the Empire. But Catherine questions the peace, recalling rumors of a brutal siege involving goblin fire. Black explains that rebuilding the city earned them some goodwill, and the large garrison led to inevitable ties with the locals. He confirms Summerholm is the true test of Callowan loyalty and the birthplace of any future rebellion. A rebellion that would threaten the very seat of the Empress's power. Because if this city holds, nothing can stop reinforcements from the wastelands of Prace. His subordinate adds that for this reason, spies and rebels have always gathered here. Catherine is unnerved by the mention of his spies, the infamous Eyes of the Empire. She recalls the terrifying stories from her hometown about people disappearing in the night. But Black just smiles, crediting Scribe with the intimidating branding. He clarifies that his real spies are far more subtle, but that doesn't mean the eyes aren't real. They just have a different purpose than simple information, gathering a lesson she's already learned once before. Catherine notes that while everyone watches the obvious threats, no one ever suspects the waitress who's just close enough to eavesdrop. She admits he's a clever bastard for playing with his foes. He lets them think they've won, only to snatch the real victory away. But to do that, you need intel, and right now she's flying blind. She asks if his agents have found anything, and he confirms 2 rebel groups. The first are the Sons of Strages, bitter veterans of the conquest. And the second is a splinter group from the local thieves guild. Catherine realizes his agents have gone silent, fearing they've been caught or worse. Black finds it hard to believe all his spies failed a sentiment he shares as they enter the city, which means they may have a hero on their hands. A single word sums up Catherine's reaction to the news. She questions if this one is careful or lucky, but Black warns the most dangerous are both. He believes it's a lone individual, as a full band of heroes would have been noticed. A gritty, avenging type of hero, one that crops up with unfortunate regularity. A powerful voice calls out to Black, addressing him as Warlord. It's General Istrid of the 6th Legion, who teases him for taking so long to arrive. Black greets her, explaining he had a situation that needed his attention. She laughs, having heard about the gold and Kojo's demise, a sweet prize indeed. Black glances back at Catherine, saying he likes her and that good things come to those who wait. Istrid complains that he's starting to sound like her partner, Sacker. She then spots a familiar face in the crowd, calling out to the captain. The captain steps forward, a towering figure with a confident smile. The two greet each other like old friends, their bond forged over many years. It's revealed Istrid's clan allied with Black back when he was still a squire. Catherine asks Scribe about her own history, but the spy mistress joined them later. As Scribe reflects on a difficult task, Black calls Catherine forward. He presents his new apprentice, Catherine Foundling, to the Orc General. Istrid sizes her up with a single dismissive comment. A comment that hits close to home, referring to the Northern Calawan Guards. But Catherine fires back, asking if her heritage is a problem. The Orc General seems taken aback by her sudden defiance, but her surprise turns to amusement, impressed by the Squire's spirit. Istrid leads them on, certain her partner Sacker is already watching them. They make their way through the sprawling military camp. The Calamities and their new apprentice head for the command tent. They arrive at the headquarters of the 6th Legion. Catherine looks on, her expression a mix of nerves and curiosity. Inside, a small goblin sits at the head of a massive table. General Sacker. She greets Black with a weary, unimpressed expression. Black offers a formal greeting to the goblin general, but Istrid complains about the stuffy atmosphere, calling for a drink. Catherine seems to agree, glad someone else finds it all a bit much. The goblin general's gaze falls on her, a silent, intense scrutiny. She immediately identifies Catherine's origins and her past as an orphan. Catherine can only confirm the truth, caught off guard by the general's insight. Sacker continues, deducing her history with the illegal fighting rings. Catherine's expression hardens, her secrets laid bare for all to see, but Istrid interrupts, telling her partner to save the mind games for later. Sacker argues that they still lack definitive proof of a hero's presence. But just as she speaks, a small vial flies through the air. Sacker's eyes narrow, realizing too late what's about to happen. And in a flash, their tense meeting is shattered. A massive explosion rips through the command tent. The blast tears through the entire military camp, leaving a scene of utter carnage in its wake. Catherine struggles to her feet, dazed and wounded. She looks around in shock at the devastation, but her resolve hardens, ready to find whoever did this and also very proud of her eyebrows. She shields her eyes, trying to assess the damage. She notes that Black, the captain, and Istrid are all still standing. But the regular soldiers weren't nearly as fortunate. A sudden, brutal stomp breaks the stunned silence, and Catherine is sent reeling from the unexpected blow. A strange energy crackles across her chest, the pain sharp and sudden. She looks up to see General Sacker, wounded but very much alive. The goblin general taunts her, mocking her Calawan heritage, but Catherine fires back, refusing to let the insult slide. Her defiance is met with a swift, punishing strike, and her shock quickly gives way to pure, unbridled fury. The goblin general smirks, claiming she was just making sure Catherine wasn't in shock. Black orders the camps locked down, determined to let no one escape. He tells the captain to go, insisting the attackers are already gone. The captain grumbles under his breath before heading out. Istrid admits it's been a while since she's been on the receiving end of such an attack. Catherine looks around at the wreckage, a question forming on her lips. She sarcastically asks if someone just dropped a comet on them. But Black calmly explains this was the work of goblin munitions. Istrid complains that the explosives always mess with her hearing. Sacker recites a grim little rhyme about the different types of goblin bombs. Sacker holds up her own dislodged eye, explaining she only survived because the bomb was faulty. Catherine can only stare, sarcastically suggesting an eye patch. She realizes it would take more than just a bomb to kill a named figure. But Black realizes with a grim certainty that they were never the true target. The real plan was to take out the city's leadership, starting with them and ending with the governor. He immediately orders a squad to check on the governor's safety. He then turns to Catherine, canceling her lessons for the evening. She agrees with a slightly manic grin, promising to keep herself occupied. A silent understanding passes between mentor and apprentice. He tells her to find Scribe, who will provide whatever she needs for her new task. She finds Black's ability to predict her moves deeply unsettling. Later, she walks through the market in clothes Scribe had prepared long ago. The disguise is perfect, a testament to the spy mistress's uncanny foresight. But Catherine is tired of being a pawn in someone else's game. She closes her eyes, reaching out with her senses to find her target, and in the spectral darkness, a figure with glowing eyes appears. A presence she can feel with her new developing powers. She pinpoints their location, a silent hunter finding its prey, but the figure immediately leaps away, sensing her gaze. Catherine just grins, realizing this little game of tag goes both ways. She realizes this changes everything. It's no longer a game of stealth. Now she's the hunter, cornering her quarry. Her plan is to drive them somewhere they can't hide in the crowds. She vaults over a cart, a blur of motion through the city. Leaping over the heads of startled onlookers, she crashes through a market stall, hot on her rival's trail. Finally, she corners the cloaked figure, leaving them nowhere to run. But a dark energy erupts, and she realizes something is wrong. It was all a trap. She wasn't the hunter, but the prey. But Catherine just grins, ready to give her rival the fight they wanted. She stands ready, her sword held firm. Her heart pounds, her eyes narrowed with focus. She swings her blade with a furious clang, locking eyes with the rival she's been hunting. Another claimant to the name of Squire, also aligned with evil. The sounds of their duel echo across the city at night. A battle unfolds on the quiet rooftops of Summerhome. Back at the camp, the others remain completely unaware. But Catherine realizes she's not facing one rival, but an entire team of them. She ducks under a blade, the fight for the name now a desperate struggle for survival. She parries a blow from one of the masked claimants, and leaps over another using the chaos to her advantage. She lands and sprints across the rooftop looking for an opening. Her eyes dart around, assessing the overwhelming odds. Her mind flashes back to the relative safety of the camp. She remembers her reluctance to end 3 strangers just to claim her name. But now, panting and cornered, she realizes her opponents have no such moral hang-ups. One of them descends from above, ready to strike a final blow. He moves with blinding speed, stopping her desperate counter. She leaps through the air, cursing her terrible luck. Her feet skid across the ground as she lands, but she recovers with a furious swing of her blade. Their swords meet in a shower of sparks. She overpowers him, sending him stumbling backward, and brings her sword down with a powerful cleave, slicing right through the tent where he fell. The canvas collapses, hiding him from view. She admits that taking out a rival does have its appeal, and she stands ready, her eyes burning with a new resolve. But she knows taking him out could unite the other 2 against her. So she focuses her attack on a different rival, but her hand slips, sliding right down her own blade. She stumbles back, the sudden pain throwing her off balance. A harsh lesson on why gauntlets are standard issue. She concedes first blood to her silent opponent, but her eyes gleam with a sudden fierce idea. She decides to quote a very unpleasant acquaintance of hers, and delivers a brutal palm strike to her rival's face. Because the last blood is the only one that truly matters. She drives her blade forward, forcing him back. The rival stumbles, clutching his face in pain. But his eyes glow with a strange power, an aspect called glare. Catherine's eyes dart to the side, spotting a nearby dock. An escape route if she can just get to it. She kicks a whip from the air, a confident smirk on her face, and begins tearing through the camp, creating as much chaos as possible. The masked rival can only stare, his own mask now cracked. He realizes her plan as their blades clash once more. If stealth is their advantage, she'll just have to make a scene. He taunts her, certain the legionaries will take his side. But Catherine doesn't give them the chance, lunging forward with a powerful strike. The force of the blow sends her rival flying backward. He lands hard, his mask now stained with his own blood. She presses her advantage, swinging her blade down. The rival kneels, wounded and clutching his neck. He glares up at her, his eyes glowing as he spits a single hateful word. Catherine just smirks, retorting with a strange insult of her own. His face contorts with rage, his hatred burning bright. But she's unimpressed, sarcastically respecting his commitment to being creepy. He glares back, vowing that their fight is far from over. And with that, he turns and flees into the night. Catherine can only grumble about his cliché exit line. She spots the other 2 on a rooftop and grins, ready for round 2. Her remaining rivals watch the chase unfold from above. The masked claimant sprints through a dark alley, trying to escape. But he runs right into a dead end, his escape cut short. Catherine catches up, admitting she was hoping for a chat. But a new voice from the shadows says, a fight will have to do. The masked rival is now trapped between Catherine and a mysterious newcomer. Catherine retorts that they started this fight just as a lit stick flies past her. Her eyes widen in sudden, dawning alarm. The bright stick lands on the ground, its fuse sputtering out. The masked rival seems just as surprised by this new development. The newcomer quotes a grim rhyme as the stick explodes in a blinding flash. Catherine can only curse, completely disoriented by the blast. A new figure with white hair leaps down, her blade aimed at the masked rival, and 2 more claimants step out from the shadows. The white-haired woman says they finally have her attention. The other 2 suggest they all have a nice little chat. The masked rival warns the newcomers not to get between him and his prey. But Catherine just mocks him for talking tough after running away. She wonders if the single blow she landed scrambled his brains. The veiled claimant tells her to hold on, defending her ally. She then insults him, claiming people from his homeland are simple-minded. The masked man can only seethe in silent fury. Catherine notes that the books on racism were apparently not exaggerating. The hooded claimant tells Catherine they can fight later, after they've talked. But the veiled woman seems eager to get rid of the vermin. Catherine points out they just threw an explosive, and should probably leave before the legionaries arrive. She points out that someone just tried to kill 2 generals, using highly volatile goblin munitions. The hooded claimant just smiles, unfazed by the news. Catherine doubts the masked rival is even capable of talking. He just glares back, confirming her suspicions. The hooded claimant says they found a safe place nearby. He offers a temporary truce, a shelter from the chaos. But the masked rival is clearly not on board with the plan. He draws his blade with a sharp, decisive sound and points it at his supposed ally, ready to fight. The veiled claimant demands he speak the words of truce. He reluctantly agrees, offering a formal oath of sanctuary. The veiled claimant seems satisfied with his cooperation. Catherine groans, completely over all this dramatic posturing. The hooded claimant urges them to hurry before the legionaries arrive. The veiled woman is surprised by her sense, but Catherine just fires back a jab of her own. The goblin claimant is stunned into silence by the comeback. She quickly tries to cover her shock with a cough, but she quickly regains her composure. Catherine shoves the masked rival aside, eager to get moving. Catherine glances back, her patience wearing thin. She looks up at the imposing veiled claimant. The woman introduces herself as Tamika. Catherine returns the introduction, asking what this is all about. She thought this competition involved more fighting and less talking. Tamika stands silently, holding her spear. She explains the goblin claimant wants a meeting before the dance begins, and Tamika sees no reason to refuse her. Catherine finds the whole situation surprisingly cordial. For a group of people who are supposed to kill each other, and so the rivals for the name of Squire walk together through the city. They arrive at a small hidden camp, gathering around a fire. The four claimants sit in a tense, uneasy silence. Catherine finally breaks it, addressing the goblin who arranged this meeting. She tells her to get on with it since this was her idea. The goblin reveals the reason for their truce: a hero is in Summerholm. Catherine isn't surprised, and neither are the others. The goblin suggests this gives them a way to settle their dispute without killing each other. But Tamika warns that hunting a hero is a dangerous game and this one might not be alone. The masked rival taunts Catherine, who retorts that Black would approve of his plan. Catherine can only stare, caught in a tense standoff with her rivals. The masked claimant confirms he knows she's with the Black Knight. Catherine dryly notes that rumors seem to travel quickly. The goblin claimant's eyes narrow, her expression sharp and focused. She argues that fighting each other only weakens the Empire, but the masked rival believes culling the weak will only make them stronger. Catherine points out he's the one who's bled the most so far. He draws his sword, but Tamika's quiet cough stops him cold. She warns him that if he continues, he won't live to see the morning. The masked rival can only seethe, stunned by the threat from his own ally. Catherine reflects that this feels right, a different kind of conflict than before. She's no longer fighting bandits or old villains. The goblin claimant flashes a confident smile. Now she's facing her peers and she knows she can win this. She asks the masked rival for his name with a bit of sass. He introduces himself as Rashid, with a flair for the dramatic. Catherine clarifies the goblin's plan. A truce until one of them takes out the hero. The goblin confirms, asking only that they stay out of her way. Catherine seems to agree with the logic. Tamika also agrees, preferring to test her skills against a hero, confirming the truce ends when their common enemy falls. The four rivals sit around the fire, their truce a fragile thing. The goblin claimant asks if Catherine accepts the terms. Catherine looks over her shoulder and agrees to the deal. But Rashid remains silent, his expression unreadable. The crack in his mask is a reminder of their earlier fight. He finally stands, calling the entire meeting a waste of time. He'll hunt the hero, but makes it clear they are all still his enemies. Catherine watches him, not entirely surprised by his attitude. He turns back to her, promising they have unfinished business. As he walks away, she considers ending their rivalry right here. She considers ending him right now, having done more for less. But Tamika warns her to stand down, sensing her intent. She explains that Rashid's true target isn't her. The goblin adds that he's protected by guest rights until dawn. Catherine weighs her options, wondering if it's worth fighting them all. But she can see her rivals are more than ready for her. A voice in her head reminds her to pick her battles carefully. With a heavy sigh, she lets the moment pass. She agrees to wait until dawn, but promises no mercy after that. A calm smile settles on her face, her decision made, and with a single word, she accepts the deal. The next day, she heads into the bustling Summerholm market. She stops at a stall looking for medical supplies. The city is a mix of locals and soldiers, a tense peace in the air. A vendor offers her a potion, promising it will win her affection, but she is thoroughly unimpressed by his sales pitch. She clarifies she's looking for medicine, not a date. He tosses her coin, the simple transaction now complete. She finds a quiet bench to rest for a moment, and lets out a weary sigh, the hunt for a hero weighing on her mind. She raises her hand, tending to her wounds, and reflects on the other claimants to her name. She thinks back to her time in lore, and the bizarre truce she's made to hunt a Calawan hero. But now that the heat of the moment has passed, and her blood is finally cooled, she takes a hard look at her situation and doesn't like what she sees. She doesn't regret her choice to become a Prezi named, but she's realizing a name isn't just a tool for power. It comes with enemies, Black's enemies, and she wonders if they all have to be hers. She admits to herself that she's starting to like Black, but she still doesn't trust him. Her eyes narrow, her mind racing with suspicion. She recalls everyone telling her he'd never take an apprentice. The question of his motives still hangs in the air. Why did he change his mind, and why did he choose her? She knows there's an angle to his plans that she's not seeing. And until she figures it out, she must be careful, biding her time until she can execute plans of her own. She realizes what she truly needs is a power base. Not one given to her, but one she builds for herself. She imagines a future where she can change things in lore. A future where she commands her very own legion. But back in the present, she scratches her head, feeling the weight of that ambition. She scoffs at herself, questioning the very idea. The thought is almost laughable in its audacity. But she doesn't dismiss it, wondering if it's truly possible. She knows there would be two major obstacles in her way. The first, of course, is Black himself, who would never let her undo his conquest. To turn Callow into a vassal state, she sees only two options. Option 1, learn all she can from him and then take him out. Option 2, earn enough trust to be granted an independent command. Besides the obvious issue with trying to fight a hero killer, there's the small problem of his family. The other calamities would tear her apart if she ever succeeded. So her only real option is to earn his trust, and she needs to do it quickly. But another problem is all around her in the bustling market. As long as the Empire is at peace, no new legions will be formed. She needs a new war, a new conquest to get a legion of her own. But she questions if she truly wants the bloodshed that would require. Her expression hardens, the weight of her ambition settling in. Her eyes snap open, a new resolve taking hold. She heads down a dark alley, her mind made up. But a familiar cloaked figure blocks her path. It's Rashid, one of her rivals for the name. A dark energy seems to emanate from him. His eye glares through the crack in his mask. She knows she can handle him, as long as the others stay out of it. Besides, it's not like he's hard to find in that getup. She returns to the camp of the 6th Legion. The guards greet her and she asks for a status report. The guard reports that the camp is being searched while the generals are treated. Exhausted from the day's events, she asks for a place to sleep. The guard directs her to Black's pavilion at the center of the camp. She knows her future legion will need soldiers loyal only to her, which means her legion will have to be precy and she'll need to learn their ways, starting with their many, many languages. She learns of their history, their sorrows, and their traditions, and she learns of their ancient enmities. She realizes this is all part of Black's grand lesson plan. And in the Callow she intends to build, there's no room for men like him, but she freezes at the sound of a voice from inside. A woman's voice dismisses her, her curiosity now sated. Black's eyes narrow, realizing he missed something crucial, a fourth presence different from the other claimants. The woman admits Catherine has potential, but she argues that her own is far greater. She is Aqua Sahelian, the heiress of Wolof. Catherine wonders if this new woman is also named. She decides to listen in, sensing a new threat, and Aqua's confidence confirms she is an enemy. Catherine's anger flares as she listens in on the conversation, but her expression quickly shifts to one of stunned disbelief. Inside, Black challenges Aqua's condescending assessment. The noblewoman dismisses Catherine as a simple orphan brawler. She claims there are thousands just like her across Callow. Aqua boasts of her own superior intellect and command experience. She reminds him of her recent military victories, which he acknowledges. Black notes her promise as a commander, despite her lack of formal training. But she retorts that he never attended the war college either. A tense silence hangs in the air between the two powerful figures. Black waits, hoping Catherine will realize she's not smarter than him. But he simply says that Catherine shows promise in other ways. A backhanded compliment that earns him a spot on her revenge list. Aqua scoffs, questioning if that promise outweighs her own skills. She admits he's been trained well, just enough to be interesting. She notes his confidence lacks the arrogance of other nobles, but she asks if he's truly as good at this game as he thinks. She reveals this isn't the first time the Credence have made a move, nor is it the first time they've sent a talented agent her way, and Catherine listens from the shadows, her world expanding once again. Aqua feels the suffocating weight of his name, even from outside. She declares that no one can rule forever. It was getting harder and harder for her, and that she is not him, a clear challenge to his authority. Black's eyes glow with a quiet intensity, but her bold words only make him laugh. He dismisses her, telling her to go home and weave her plots. He asks her to remind her mother of their last encounter, a chilling reminder that a spike over Ader's gates is still empty. Aqua crushes her goblet, her composure finally breaking. She storms out of the tent, her pride wounded. Aqua glares back one last time before storming off into the night. Catherine watches her go, a new and powerful rival now on her radar. She steps inside, but Black already knows she was listening in. He tells her it was a wise move, she'll need every advantage against the heiress. Catherine challenges him, asking why he chose her if Aqua is so talented. He tells her not to take his words as a criticism of her skills. He explains that Aqua has been trained for war and politics her entire life. A flashback reveals the heiress, Aqua Sahelian of Wolof. She was groomed for power from a very young age. He explains that Akua's competence is simply a product of that upbringing. He explains that Aqua's skills are not truly her own. Catherine decides to press him for a real answer. He admits that training the heiress would have been easier. She asks if he chose her simply because she's easier to control. Black lets out a weary sigh, the question clearly expected. He decides to address her unspoken fears once and for all. He promises that he will never lie to her or deceive her, but clarifies it's not out of any sense of honor. It's because deception would be foolish in the long run. A simple, pragmatic truth for the game they now play. He explains that if he lied, she would eventually find out at the worst possible time, and her inevitable revenge would lead directly to his own demise. He notes that a staggering number of his predecessors died for failing to learn that simple lesson. Catherine realizes his honesty is just a form of enlightened selfishness. She knows if he'd tried to sell her on honor or a sacred bond, she wouldn't have believed a single word of it. But this cold, calculated logic she can accept that he's glad she recognizes he's smart enough to see the long game. He calls her petulance a bad habit, but she retorts that it's a satisfying one. He then explains that the heiress had to be smart to survive, a trait inherited from her mother. He explains her mother supports the opposing faction, He warns that every move Aqua makes is calculated and deadly. Catherine takes the warning to heart, realizing the danger she's in. She promises to be careful, knowing names aren't earned through kindness. But she still needs to know why he chose her over the heiress. He pivots, asking why she never made friends at the orphanage, a question that catches her completely off guard. She admits she never had much in common with the other girls. They couldn't understand her pride or her rebellious spirit, so eventually, she gave up trying to make them. That's when she learned to hide her ambitions and keep her secrets. And Black correctly deduces that their ignorance only fueled her anger. The memory stings, how they called her insane for wanting change. Black continues, saying that even those who care never truly understand. He chose her because he remembers what it's like to look at the world and know you could do better. He admits he's been called mad for it, and she will be too. The heiress's skills can be taught, but Catherine's righteous anger cannot. And that is the very thing that will let her defeat her rival. He tells her to get some rest, because their work begins tomorrow. After all, if she's going to crush her rivals, why wait? The next day, they arrive at a new, imposing location. The scene shifts to a memory from her past. A 14-year-old Catherine, training with a fierce determination. Her instructor watches her form, a knowing smile on his face. He suddenly trips her with his prosthetic leg, and sends her sprawling onto the training grounds. She complains about the cheap shot, questioning his honor. But her teacher, old Liam, reminds her that survival is its own honor. He warns her that their enemies, the Prazy, certainly don't play by the rules. He then teases her about her own questionable tactics in their last spar. But Catherine fires back, calling out his own habit of cheating at cards. He scoffs, asking what cards have to do with fighting. He tells her to focus on her footing first, not just power. But he admits she's not wrong about the royal guards. He remembers them as fools, obsessed with honor and virtue, a pride that led them to be utterly crushed by the legions. Back in the present, Catherine sits alone in a tavern. She takes a long drink, muttering under her breath, and complains about the quality of the local ale. She spent all day finding this place, a perfect spot for her plan. It's cheap, busy, and filled with the very people she needs to find. She guesses half the people here are former royal guards. The tavern's name, the Lost Crown, is a fittingly obvious rebel hideout. A bartender approaches, offering to top off her drink, but she refuses, wanting to keep her head clear for what's to come. He mistakes her for one of the Dioraide, a northern people. A flashback explains they are brown-cloaked warriors from the grass marches, fierce defenders of the border who would never make a truce with the enemy. A memory of their endless war against the Orcish clans. Their home, the Duchy of Dawin, remains a kingdom within a kingdom. Back in the present, the bartender continues to press her. She knows her cover is perfect. No one would suspect a Dia-Wraith of serving Black. She tells the bartender her coin purse is getting a little light. She explains that she's looking for work in the city. But not as a server, she's looking for a fighting ring. He suggests a place, but Catherine says she's already been. She adds with a smirk that it was full of greenskins. Her casual racism gets the exact reaction she was hoping for. She takes a drink, hiding her nerves as the bait is taken. The bartender leans in, asking what she did back in lore. The two of them stare each other down, a silent challenge in the air. She explains she served drinks and fought in the rings, but only with her fists, leaving before things got too serious. He mentions her parents, but she reveals she's an orphan. He correctly guesses she's a foundling from an imperial orphanage. A flash of real anger shows as she mentions Kojo's corruption. The two of them stand in a tense, silent standoff. He offers a quick apology, which she accepts coolly, but he continues to press, asking why she left lore. She knows he's testing her, and explains Kojo's greed drove her out. The bartender finally seems convinced, noting the city is full of veterans. The bartender considers her story, his expression thoughtful. He tells her he might know a place not a ring, but close enough. Catherine asks the only question that matters. Does it pay? He confirms it does, but she'll need to be searched by his daughter first. Catherine agrees with a confident nod, her risky gamble paying off. She knows he's looking for the mark of the eyes of the Empire. The bartender's eyes narrow, his scrutiny intense and unwavering. Catherine stands, ready to get this over with. He calls out to his daughter, Elise, telling her to keep an eye on their new friend, who will be joining their cousins for a drink. Catherine walks through the tavern, her mind focused on the mission. She's greeted by a scarred veteran who already knows her name. She asks who they are, and they confirm she's passed their spy check. But one of them is still wary, since no one can vouch for her. He explains the Pracy have been watching them since the governor's demise. But Catherine's sharp ears pick up on an interesting detail. She feigns impatience, saying she's here for work, not a secret club. The two men continue to size her up, their expressions grim. The scarred man dismisses his partner's concerns with an insult. He then stands, telling Catherine it's time for a little walk. Catherine agrees with a dark smile, ready to see what they have to offer. The scarred man places a hand on his partner's shoulder, calming him down. As the other man leaves, Elise keeps a watchful eye on their new recruit. They lead her out of the tavern and into the winding city streets. Her guides peek around a corner, scanning for any sign of trouble. The scarred man signals that the coast is clear, and they press onward. A new figure in a purple cloak now leads them deeper into the city. He explains that since the attack, the regular city guard has disappeared, and at the same time, the governor was eliminated in her own home. Now, the legions are tearing the city apart, searching for the culprits. But the hero's hopes for chaos are quickly dashed, not while Black is in charge. And to Catherine's own surprise, The people of Summerholm aren't celebrating the governor's demise. Governor Layla, despite her family's history, was good for business and respected by all. The locals whisper in fear, blaming the sons of Stregus for the attack. Instead of cheering, they worry about who will replace her, fearing a return to corruption. She asks her guides where they're headed, an old royal smithy. The scarred man grunts, still sizing her up. Catherine questions their destination, believing it's now owned by the Précy. But her guide just gives her a look, his silence speaking volumes. She explains the legions took the main royal guard smithy, but ignored the smaller repair shops, making them a perfect hideout. But the scarred man cuts the history lesson short. Elise just shrugs, clearly used to his charming personality. They move through the streets, right under the legion's nose. Their journey takes them deeper into the city's old quarters. They finally arrive at their destination, a large, unassuming building. The scarred man gestures for her to follow him inside. Elise sprints away, her part in this little field trip now over. The other rebel opens the door, his expression still full of suspicion. Inside, a massive forge burns brightly. Catherine takes in her new surroundings. The tools of the trade are scattered around the room. The scarred man impatiently urges her to move faster. He leads her down a set of creaking wooden stairs, revealing a hidden hall filled with armed men and women. She draws a few curious looks from the crowd. But she senses no open hostility, they only bring trusted people here, which makes her wonder why she's the exception to the rule. Her guide tells her to take a seat, the main event won't start until the swordsman arrives. Catherine confirms that there really is a hero in Summerholm. The scarred man tells her she'll meet him soon, the lone swordsman. He explains the swordsman has already caught 5 spies and his word is final, a realization that sends Catherine's mind into a silent panic. She reasons that his name doesn't sound like a truth detector, so she can probably dance around his questions with careful half-truths. But if he asks a direct question, her entire mission is over. She sits down, her heart pounding with a nervous rhythm. Just as a heavy door begins to creak open, Catherine looks up, knowing the man she's about to meet could be her end. The sound of footsteps echoes from the doorway. A cloaked figure steps into the hall, his back to the room. He turns, revealing himself as the lone swordsman. Catherine's inner monologue confirms she knows a hero when she sees one. Apparently, his leather coat is a dead giveaway. He waves casually, telling the rebels to stay seated. But Catherine's eyes are fixed on his enchanted sword. The swordsman's gaze sweeps across the assembled partisans. While some cheer for their champion, others remain skeptical. He begins a speech, promising them the victories they crave. He offers them a prime example of a victory they can seize. He reveals the Black Knight has come to Summerholm and suggests they kill him. The swordsman argues this is a rare opportunity to strike at the Carrion Lord himself. Catherine's mind races, relieved he didn't see through her disguise immediately. The hero reveals they still have goblin munitions from a recent raid, and he proposes they use them to end the man who destroyed their kingdom. But the scarred veteran warns that it will take more than bombs to kill Black. Another man agrees, recalling how Black and the warlock took down the witch. The swordsman's expression hardens, his plan meeting unexpected resistance. He then turns his gaze directly to Catherine, asking for her name. The veteran's eyes narrow, a bitter memory resurfacing. He recalls the Witch of the Woods dropping a bridge on Black and the warlock. He remembers the confidence of his fellow knights before the battle, a confidence that quickly turned to rage and desperation. But even after the bridge fell, the two calamities simply walked out of the wreckage unscathed. They emerged as if it were nothing more than a light drizzle. The memory hangs heavy in the room, a grim reminder of their enemy's power. The veteran points out that at least the warlock isn't here this time. But the swordsman argues that munitions can kill the named, a lesson the Empire taught them long ago. The swordsman recalls another famous named the Paladin of the Blessed Isle, a hero who fell when Black used goblin fire to burn her fortress to the ground. The scarred veteran argues that such weapons only work on lesser named. He reminds the hero that they're facing the calamities, a different breed of monster. But the swordsman just smiles, claiming he's no ordinary hero. He steps forward, his confidence unwavering, and grabs the veteran, vowing to see his oath through to the bitter end. Catherine can only watch, completely over the dramatic posturing. She wonders if he really thinks a grand speech is enough to take down Black. But then she realizes with the hero, a story like that just might work. She realizes a role is just a story, and this hero's is fueled by grief, and feeding that story might just give them a real shot at Black. But the scarred veteran cuts in, saying there's one last thing to do. He presents their new recruit for the hero's inspection. Catherine takes a deep breath, her heart pounding. She stands, asking what exactly this little test involves. She warns them that if poetry is required, they've got the wrong girl. The swordsman just smiles, telling her to come closer. She walks forward, stepping into the lion's den. He asks for her name, and she offers her own, a dangerous truth. She wonders if giving her real name will register as a lie. The swordsman is equally confused, his power giving him nothing. He decides to test her with a simple, direct question. But Catherine cleverly sidesteps the trap with a witty retort. His men erupt in laughter at her sharp answer. But a quick cough from their leader silences the room. The swordsman sighs, seemingly stumped by her defiance. She finally gives a straight answer, which he finds strange. Catherine quips that she's used to that kind of reaction. He admits his power is useless against her, a first for the hero. She retorts that if she had a silver for every time she heard that. But her sentence is cut short by the flash of a blade. The swordsman lunges, but Catherine blocks his surprise attack. She holds her ground, her grip tight on her own sword, but her eyes widen in shock at what happens next. The other rebels draw their weapons, surrounding their own hero. They point their blades at him, defending the newcomer. The scarred veteran accuses the swordsman of being a traitor. Catherine smirks, noting that technically she's the only one not committing treason. But a nervous glance shows she knows she's walking on a razor's edge. The rebels realize the doors are blocked, their escape route now cut off. The swordsman turns to his men, knowing the question on all their minds. He asks them if they think this new girl is a spy, and with a confident grin, he says the answer might surprise them. The rebels can only stare, their faces a mask of shock and confusion. Catherine and the swordsman exchange a tense, knowing glance. The scarred veteran confirms what they all suspected the answer is yes. Catherine sarcastically complains about her luck, already deciding the order of their demise. But the swordsman turns on her, declaring her a villain and demanding she surrender. Catherine just sighs, noting that diplomacy is clearly not his strong suit. But Catherine flips the script, claiming they've all fallen into her trap. The swordsman, however, is not buying her act for a second, just as another figure crashes through the wall, joining the chaos. Catherine recognizes the masked claimant, Rashid, and tells him to be quiet for once. Her eyes narrow, her focus shifting to the new arrivals. A silhouette emerges from the dust and Catherine admits it's a pretty good entrance. The armored figure steps forward, a silent and imposing presence, and raises a crossbow with a decisive click. Catherine recognizes Tamika, wondering if this is her big move. The rivals stand amidst the chaos, and Catherine can't help but feel a little underwhelmed. Catherine smirks, asking if the goblin claimant is joining their little party. Tamika nods, confirming their final rival is on her way. The swordsman looks down at Catherine, feeling he owes her an apology. He plays along with the dramatic trope, asking what exactly he's apologizing for. But Catherine just grins, calling it a sucker's bet. She stands between the two, ready to turn this chaos to her advantage. The swordsman can only stare, completely baffled by this turn of events. Catherine's grin widens as she declares her plan is working perfectly. Tamika questions her, wondering what plan she could possibly have. The swordsman warns Tamika not to encourage her, but Catherine's eyes are already scanning the room. Searching for a more defensible position, she recalls Black's lesson. Monologues are for amateurs. A lesson that now makes her laugh out loud. The swordsman asks what she could possibly find so funny. She explains that this chaos is all part of her plan, and if a monologue buys her time, she's happy to talk. Just then, a dark energy fills the room as the final rival arrives. Catherine turns, her expression a mix of shock and alarm. The goblin claimant moves with a sudden, shadowy speed, but Catherine is faster, her blade cutting through the air, cleaving down with a furious, powerful strike. The goblin sidesteps the attack with practiced ease. Catherine's sword slams into the ground, her attack missing its mark. The goblin notes that Catherine can keep up this little trick all night. Catherine catches her breath, realizing this is why villains avoid long speeches. But her eyes dart to the side, catching another movement. The lone swordsman blocks a crossbow bolt from Tamika, and counters with a swift, powerful swing of his own. The crossbow is sent flying, clattering to the floor. The swordsman's blade cuts through the air, aimed at Tamika. But the goblin claimant lunges forward with a dagger of her own. She dodges under his swing with blinding speed. The swordsman's eyes are locked on his new target. He parries her attack with a sharp clang of steel, and reveals a small glowing stick in his other hand. He shoves the explosive device right into her armor. The goblin is sent flying back from the sudden impact. The swordsman lands a solid blow, sending her reeling. Catherine's eyes are fixed on the hero's blade. She senses a dark enchantment, a power that feels deeply wrong. Tamika is already wounded, her face stained with blood. Her hand trembles, her defense beginning to falter. Catherine realizes the hero is in a league of his own. He moves with a brutal, practiced efficiency, methodically breaking through Tamika's desperate guard. But Catherine decides she's not letting this become a free-for-all. She spots an opening, her eyes gleaming with a new plan. And with a sudden lunge, she joins the chaotic fight. The scarred veteran turns his attention to Catherine. He and another rebel charge forward, their blades ready. Catherine asks if they're really upset about her lie, given the current situation. The rebel's armor clinks as he closes the distance. Their blades meet in a chaotic three-way clash. She parries a heavy blow from the scarred veteran. He screams at her, calling her a traitor to Callow. With a deft twist of her sword, she counters his attack. She seems thoroughly unimpressed by his patriotic outrage. She asks what he's fighting for, the broken kingdom of the past. She tells him the kingdom is gone, dead, with the last of the royal line. With a sudden, brutal kick, she sends the other rebel flying. She argues that their people's only chance is to have an ally inside the empire. The veteran brings his own blade down with a furious roar. Their swords meet with a deafening clang. He accuses her of instigating a rebellion that will only bleed the legions. He calls it a losing fight that will only bring punishment to their people. Their blades remain locked in a desperate struggle. He screams that her entire plan is foolish. She leans in close, her voice a low and dangerous whisper. And with cold fury, she tells him she has no patience for fools. With a sudden brutal swing, she disarms the veteran, sending his sword clattering across the stone floor. She stands over him, her own blade ending his part in this fight. She catches her breath, the adrenaline of the battle still coursing through her. The last rebel can only stare in horror as she turns to leave. She smashes through a nearby door, making a run for it. Her eyes are filled with a grim, bloody determination. She finally stops to catch her breath, the chaos of the smithy left behind. The door behind her rattles with furious pounding. Insults echo from the other side as she catches her breath. She takes stock of her situation, a lot of enemies and no friends, a truth that's somehow more irritating coming from herself. But a familiar, terrible idea begins to form, since all her enemies are in a flammable building with a lit furnace. Just then, a new figure peeks around the corner. The goblin claimant smirks, taunting her about her lack of allies. As the sounds of battle continue, Catherine stands by the forge. The goblin steps forward, mocking her for being all alone. The goblin claimant mocks her for her predicament, but Catherine retorts that friends are overrated anyway. She asks if their truce still means anything. The goblin explains it's nothing personal, just business. Catherine wonders who would pay to have her taken out. The answer is revealed. The heiress, Avenge, has bribed the other claimants. The goblin admits she's not sure about Rashid, but the heiress is spending a fortune to see Catherine gone. Catherine seethes, already hating a woman she's never even met. The goblin then asks if she understands the heiress's true game. She's playing them all against each other, planning to claim the name for herself. The goblin explains the heiress will be rivals with whoever wins the name. She smirks, adding that Aqua probably thinks she's already won. For some reason, the heiress sees Catherine as the most dangerous claimant, and she might be right. But she's happy to help Aqua, as long as she gets what she wants. Catherine asks if that means she wants her dead. The goblin's face twists with ambition, declaring she'll be the squire no matter what it takes. She explains that goblins have never held such high positions, despite their sacrifices for the Empire. And if she has to eliminate a few humans to change that, so be it. Catherine looks on. A flicker of understanding in her eyes, she can sympathize with that. She knows what it's like to be an outsider, fighting for a place in the world. She knows what it's like to be on the wrong side of the précis boot. But she's not about to become a casualty in someone else's ambition. She tries to reason with the goblin, suggesting they honor their truce until the hero is dealt with. But the goblin just flashes a wicked smile, promising not to fight her. Instead, she pulls out a small, dark sphere from her pouch. Catherine lunges forward, realizing the deception too late. A high-pitched sound overwhelms her senses, leaving her stunned. She stumbles back, completely disoriented by the sudden attack. She struggles to her feet, wondering what kind of weapon was just used. It wasn't a sharper or a bright stick, but a third, unknown type of munition. She realizes it's a smoker, a gas-based munition, but a massive green explosion erupts from the forge. And she knows with dawning horror it's goblin fire, a substance so restricted that possessing it is a death sentence. Because it's a fire that burns through everything, even magic. She sprints for the exit, desperate to escape the inferno. Once it starts, goblin fire burns for an entire week on its own. But she freezes at the door, realizing it's too obvious. She knows the goblin claimant would have already trapped it, which leaves her only one option: go back into the fight she just fled. Her new plan is simple: get out before the smithy becomes a literal inferno. But as she throws the door open, a familiar silhouette blocks her path. It's Rashid, the masked claimant, looking for a fight at the worst possible time. He reminds her that they still have unfinished business, and with a grim smile, he admits he's been looking forward to this. Catherine can only stare, questioning if he really wants to duel in a room full of goblin fire. She suggests they could at least move to a less deadly location, but Rashid refuses, unwilling to let another rival steal his moment. He lunges forward, his mind set on settling their score, and Catherine meets his blade, their fight beginning amidst the spreading flames. But Rashid refuses, his pride demanding this fight happen now. Catherine holds her ground, her blade ready for his attack. All around them, the goblin fire consumes the smithy's furnace. It melts solid steel as if it were wax. The flames spread across the floor, the structure groaning under the heat. The wooden beams of the ceiling begin to crack and splinter. And with a deafening snap, one of them gives way. A massive burning timber plummets towards the dueling rivals, but they remain locked in their struggle, oblivious to the danger from above. Catherine grits her teeth, pushing back with all her might. Rashid's eye glares through his broken mask, his focus absolute. He leaps through the air, his blade aimed right at Catherine. She grits her teeth, barely managing to block his furious assault. She swings back, but he's already moved out of the way. Catherine realizes he's much faster than their last encounter. She deduces he must have found a healer for his wounds. With a frustrated sigh, she decides to do this the hard way. Their blades meet again in a shower of green-tinged sparks. The two rivals continue their deadly dance as the smithy burns around them. Catherine is knocked to the ground, the force of his blow sending her sliding back. She's sent flying by Rashid's brutal strike. She tumbles through the green-tinged air. Landing hard on the stone floor, she struggles to her feet, the pain sharp and sudden. But a new voice cuts through the chaos, hoping his blade wasn't poisoned. Catherine remembers her training, refusing to show weakness. She notes a shield would be handy right now, but would also be a dead giveaway. She turns to face the hero, her newest problem in a room full of them. The swordsman stands amidst the flames, his expression unreadable, and a strange, spectral figure appears at his side. A spectral presence appears behind him as his blade clicks with power. He leans in, his sudden intensity catching Catherine completely off guard. He attacks with overwhelming force, and her arm gives way under the strain. She struggles to understand what's happening as she bleeds from the impact. She realizes he's become far more powerful than when they last fought. But his technique is the same, which means this power comes from his name. Her mind flashes back to a lesson with a masked black. She remembers asking him about the aspects of his own name. He revealed that one of his aspects is simply one, conquer. And the more a named acts in line with their role, the more power they can access. Black explains that for every evil aspect, there is a good one to counter it. Back in the present, Catherine realizes this fight is feeding one of Rashid's aspects. It's a power she can't match, since she hasn't even figured out her own yet. Rashid smirks, saying he was waiting for the look of understanding on her face. The moment she finally realizes her place in this world, she lunges forward anyway, her blade aimed right at him. But he casually bats her sword aside with a single hand. Her mind screams at her for hesitating, unlike when she faced the Baron. But she also recalls spending that fight running away and still almost dying. Rashid suggests he should just leave her here to burn alive. Catherine coughs violently, the green haze choking her. She doubles over as the swordsman watches, unimpressed. The terrible truth hits her she's losing and she's going to die. She has no tricks left, no clever words to save her now. He's faster, stronger, and with every beat of her heart, she grows weaker. Exhaustion washes over her, the last few months feeling like a lifetime. This is how it ends, abandoned in a burning smithy. She thinks of all the plans she had, all the ambitions she held, a vision of a better world, a future she wanted to build. But Rashid's voice cuts through her thoughts, calling her nothing more than a pest to be crushed. But something in his words sparks a final, defiant ember. She trembles with rage, telling him he doesn't get to say that. Rashid can only stare, confused by her sudden outburst. She screams back, her eyes burning with a furious light. Even if he wins, he doesn't get to dismiss her like that. A strange power begins to glow from within her chest. More than anything, she wants to prove this arrogant fool wrong. It doesn't matter if she's outclassed or outmatched. She will make him choke on those words, even if she bleeds for it. Even if she has to burn to do it. Even if it tears her apart, she will struggle to the very end. Rashid can only watch, sensing the sudden shift, and a brutal strike sends him reeling. He stumbles back, completely caught off guard. He stares in disbelief at her sudden power. Catherine stands wreathed in a new, terrifying energy. He lunges forward with a furious scream, but she stops his blade with a single bare hand. And with a crushing grip, she ends his assault for good. Her eyes glow with a terrifying green light as she feels her power awaken. She can feel her name pulsing under her skin, feeding off the fight and making her stronger. The lone swordsman is sent crashing to the ground. He lands hard, clutching his arm in agony. His face is a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Catherine stands over him, her power now fully unleashed, and with a single brutal strike, she ends his part in this fight. She realizes she was wrong to ever think he was fast, because in this moment, she is just as quick. She realizes he's not nearly as skilled with a blade as he thinks. The hero can only scream in agony. He stares in disbelief, his pride completely shattered. But her attention is drawn to another sound. As the scarred veteran falls, his fight now over, Catherine stands over the defeated hero, asking what that makes him now. She calls him a cockroach, something to be stepped on. But the power fades, and she realizes the toll it's taken on her body. She knows that little burst of power won't be happening again tonight, but she's certain that when Rashid fell, something shifted a piece of a puzzle she can't yet see. The swordsman notes there's no rest for the wicked. As Catherine realizes Tamika is still in the fight, her spear glows with a strange, swirling power. The hero parries the strike, their duel continuing. He presses his advantage against the armored claimant. His blade cuts through the air with blinding speed, but Catherine blinks, trying to clear her vision, only to see that Tamika has somehow multiplied. Her eyes narrow, trying to make sense of the new threat. The copies attack in unison, their tactics simple but effective. Their timing is too good, preventing the swordsman from landing a clean hit. But Catherine remains unnoticed, watching from the sidelines. She takes in the chaotic scene, a 3-on-1 assault. One of the copies, an archer, draws back its bow and fires a shot not at the hero but directly at her. She realizes they must be sharing eyes to coordinate so perfectly. She calls out to the lone swordsman, saying she has a question, but he shuts her down with a single, blunt refusal. Catherine can only stare, completely baffled by his response. She argues that he didn't even know what she was going to ask. The swordsman's eyes narrow, asking who she really is, but Catherine just smiles, suggesting they can discuss that later. He replies that he's as practical as the situation demands. She presses him, asking if he's practical enough to work with an enemy. She proposes a temporary alliance for the greater good, but her offer is cut short by an arrow to the shoulder. She realizes she was too focused on the spear-wielding copy, and not the archer who just ended their little chat. The swordsman then asks if she's Calawan as the standoff continues. He already knows the answer, confirming she's from Laura. The swordsman clicks his tongue in annoyance, but he agrees to her terms only until their common foes are dealt with. Catherine can't resist a sarcastic remark about his charming personality, but Tamika's copy tries to break their fragile alliance, reminding the hero that Catherine is here to end him. The real Tamika joins in, telling Catherine the swordsman is her enemy, but Catherine retorts that Tamika is just as much of a threat, all while the goblin fire consumes the smithy around them. And so, the two enemies stand back to back, ready to face the immediate threat together. The swordsman stands firm, his blade held ready. Tamika's copy reminds him that Catherine is here to end him. The hero considers her words, a low growl in his throat. The real Tamika then turns her attention to Catherine. But Catherine just fires back that they're all enemies here. The chaotic battle resumes, a whirlwind of steel and fire. One of the copies pauses, turning its attention back to Catherine. The real Tamika scoffs, calling their temporary alliance foolish, and her spear-wielding copy lunges at Catherine once more. The real Tamika begins to spin her spear, gathering a terrifying power. The spear-wielding copy slams into Catherine with brutal force. The enchanted weapon shatters on impact. A strange concussive energy ripples through her body. She screams in agony, the blow landing on her wounded shoulder. Her sword slips from her grasp, clattering to the ground. She grits her teeth, fighting through the overwhelming pain, and forces herself back up, her resolve unbroken. But Tamika's copy looms over her, ready to deliver the final blow. Suddenly, a flash of steel intercepts the attack. The swordsman holds his ground, honoring their fragile truce. Catherine reaches for her sword, her body battered and bruised, but Tamika's boot slams down on her wounded hand. The armored claimant looms over her, spear held ready. She raises the weapon high, preparing to end this fight for good. Catherine can only grit her teeth, cursing her terrible luck. Tamika glances back at the ongoing battle, before pressing her boot down harder on Catherine's hand. Her eyes are filled with a cold, unwavering resolve. But she hesitates, wondering what her next move should be. Catherine lies defeated, knowing she spent all her power on Rashid. She lies on the ground, seemingly weaponless and defeated. But a sudden realization flashes in her eyes. She remembers the dagger still strapped to her belt. With a furious roar, she springs up from the floor. Tamika is caught completely off guard by the sudden counter, and Catherine drives the small blade into her rival's throat. The blow lands with a brutal, crushing impact. Tamika stumbles backward, clutching the sudden wound. Her face twists in a silent scream of shock and agony. As she falls, the lone swordsman sees his opening to strike. The lone swordsman's blade cuts through the air, landing a final decisive blow on the armored claimant. And with that, Tamika's copies vanish, her fight finally over. Catherine looks up from the ground, dagger still in hand. She struggles to rise, reaching for her fallen sword. The goblin fire rages around them, the smithy collapsing. The swordsman realizes the goblin claimant cheater set fire to both ends of the building. Of course she did, a fact that earns a weary smirk from Catherine. She looks up at her temporary ally, her expression unreadable. And now, only the two of them remain in the burning inferno. The swordsman declares their temporary alliance is officially over. Catherine sighs, knowing she can't avoid this final melee. He lunges forward with a sudden, brutal strike. His eyes are cold, his intent clear. Catherine falls, her strength finally giving out. But the swordsman turns, his part in this fight now done. He leaps into the collapsing inferno, choosing his own path. He leaves her behind in the burning smithy. But Catherine remembers a simple, brutal lesson. Do wrong the right way. Later, a lone figure walks away from the city walls under the moonlight. The lone swordsman stands alone, his expression grim. But his fight is far from over as he blocks a sudden attack. A lit munition clatters across the ground, and a familiar, wicked smile appears from the shadows. The goblin claimant Chider mocks him for surviving her little trap. He complains that villains are like weeds, always springing up where you least expect them. But his words only seem to amuse her. She lunges forward with blinding speed, and the hero is forced back by her relentless assault. The swordsman grits his teeth, his focus absolute. He raises his blade to meet her charge, but Chitter just grins, because he has another explosive ready in his other hand. Meanwhile, Catherine drifts in a dark, empty void. She sits up, surrounded by an endless, silent darkness. A lone figure, lost in the abyss of her own mind. She looks around, completely disoriented by the strange vision. Her own identity feels distant, a question she can't answer. She gasps, snapping back to reality with a jolt. Her head pounds, the pain of her ordeal finally catching up to her. Her eyes flutter open, filled with a dawning awareness. She finds herself in a gallery of her own life, and a grim understanding settles on her face. She takes a single, determined step forward, reaching out to touch the memories of her past. She remembers her name, Catherine Foundling, an orphan who fought for silver. She remembers the lives she's ended and the legendary sword she shattered. She is a traitor to her people, and loyal to no cause but her own, an apprentice to the very monster she dreams of taking the world from. She is Catherine Foundling, and this is where her path has led. A sudden crack shatters the silence of her mind. Her journey ends here, bleeding out amidst the green flames. A deep cold settles in, along with a maddening itch. She feels like an unfinished painting, one that needs a final brushstroke to be complete. The gallery of her past begins to rumble and shake, and the walls of her memory come crashing down. She stands alone in the wreckage of her own mind. She can no longer sense Tamika or Rashid. She realizes with a grim certainty that her rivals are dead. But a sudden, shocking thought stops her cold. She can no longer sense the goblin claimant, Chider. The lone swordsman went outside right where Chider was waiting. And if he killed her, that means all the other claimants are gone. The full weight of that realization finally dawns on her. She is the last one standing, the sole survivor of the contest. And that makes her the one and only Squire. Her mind clears as the name settles in, but her body is still broken. A grim reminder that for villains, some wounds never truly heal. But a voice in her head screams for her to get up, unless she wants to celebrate her new title by burning to a crisp. She considers the thought half a corpse. A ragged breath escapes her lips, the pain overwhelming. Her body lies still, surrounded by the emerald flames. But she's raised a corpse before her own. A flicker of resolve crosses her face. She finds herself back in the dark void of her mind. knowing she has to act before her heart stops beating for good. She reaches out, grasping at the threads of her new power. A dark energy flows into her, wrapping around her hand. She embraces the darkness, her resolve hardening. She sinks deep into her name, into the cold abyss of her new role, and with a final silent vow, she decides to use it. Back in the burning smithy, a light glows from within her chest. The power of the squire spreads through her like a web. It knits her broken body back together, piece by painful piece. Her eyes snap open, ready to pull the threads of her own fate, and with sheer force of will, she begins to rise. She pulls on the threads of her new power, refusing to die here. Her body responds, stitching itself back together piece by painful piece. She rises from the ashes, bloodied but far from broken. Her eyes burn with a terrifying manic resolve. A wicked smile spreads across her face, ready for her next trick. She focuses her will, forcing her broken body to obey. The threads of her name cut away the damage, weaving her anew. She stands, healed just enough to finish this fight. Her weapons lie before her in the Emerald Inferno, and with a single step, she moves to reclaim them. She forces herself up, her blades scraping against the stone floor. With a ragged breath, she urges her broken body to move. Her grip is tight, her resolve now absolute. A grim determination settles on her face. She is Catherine Foundling, the squire, and it's time to leave this hellhole. She stands silhouetted against the inferno she survived, and walks away from the wreckage without a second glance. But the moment she's clear, her body begins to give out. She catches herself against a wall, her hand trembling from the strain. Finally safe, she collapses in a dark alley, the fight finally over. She lies in the alley, a spent munition lying just out of reach. She finally accepts that Chider, the goblin claimant, is truly dead. She reflects that Chider's plan was a mirror of her own, only executed with far more ruthless precision. But in the end, even that wasn't enough to save her. The lone swordsman cut her down without a second thought. The same hero who nearly ended Catherine's own story. Now she rides through the night, a ghost on horseback. Her eyes are fixed on the path ahead, her resolve hardened. She can feel the threads of her new power, ready to be pulled. A voice from her past echoes in her mind, a warning to never lose focus. Because a single mistake would leave her as dead as her rivals. The memory fades, but the lesson remains etched on her bloodied face. She walks through the city, her final target waiting in the distance, and begins the long, arduous climb up a flight of stone stairs. But she falters, questioning why she's even doing this. She can barely think straight, let alone face another fight. But she sees the lone swordsman at the top, his back turned to her, and a ruthless, desperate plan begins to form in her mind. With a sudden leap, she springs into action. The swordsman turns, alerted by a sound from behind. Turns out puppeteering your own broken body isn't great for stealth. He recognizes her, his expression hardening with disbelief. He tells her she doesn't know when to quit, but his eyes widen in shock as he sees her condition. He asks what she's done to herself, horrified by the sight. Catherine stumbles forward, her head bowed from the strain. But she looks up, her eyes burning with a manic defiance. A wild laugh escapes her lips, as she spits a mouthful of blood in a final, desperate taunt. The two stand in a tense, awkward silence. She remembers that, oh right, she's still actively dying. With a sudden swing, she ignites a bright stick, and hurls it directly at the stunned hero. It explodes behind him in a blinding flash of light. She forces her broken body forward, her sword clattering to the ground. But she retrieves it, ready for one final confrontation. A terrifying smile spreads across her face as she advances, and their blades meet in a final desperate clash. But she knows this power is tearing her apart from the inside. She realizes his enchanted blade is cutting right through her own. He shoves her back, his power far too great for her to handle. And with a single decisive push, her sword is sent flying from her grasp. It clatters to the stone floor, leaving her completely defenseless. She struggles to stay on her feet as the hero watches, his expression grim. But she just smiles, insisting through the blood that her plan is working. He asks if her plan was to turn herself into some kind of monster. The two of them stand alone on the high battlements of the city wall. But the stone behind the swordsman begins to crack and groan, and a massive chunk of the wall breaks away, plummeting into the river below. The two Callowans stand in a tense, bloody standoff. He questions her loyalty, saying they should be fighting together. He asks how she can possibly justify working for tyrants. She retorts that there's no one else to work for, noting he was less chatty with a sword. He passionately declares he fights for Callow and its people. But the architecture of the city tells a different story. She holds the broken remains of her sword to his throat, and tells him that the kingdom he's fighting for is gone. It died 20 years ago, before either of them were even born. But he argues that as long as one person fights, the kingdom still lives. She can see in his eyes that he truly believes it. She scoffs, finding his grand revelations utterly predictable, and sarcastically crowns him the lord of fools' causes. But he grits his teeth, declaring that freedom is never foolish. He lunges forward, but she dodges his clumsy attack, and with a sudden spring, she leaps away from him. A spectral figure appears in her mind, mocking his empty promises. She asks how he plans to free anyone by killing governors. She points out that no one is more free now than before he started. His hand clenches into a fist, his anger finally boiling over, and with a sudden brutal chop, she seizes the lone swordsman, her broken blade at his throat. He asks if he should kneel to the enemy, just as she has, but he declares he would rather die than betray his cause. Catherine knows she can end him right here, the story finally bending to her will. but she questions if killing him will truly bring her the power she seeks. She knows that as long as there is peace, her ambitions will be stalled. But she can see a path forward no matter how bloody it might be. She challenges him to prove he won't abandon Callow. The swordsman's expression shifts, caught off guard by her demand. She challenges him to come at her again if he wants to win, and this time to do it properly. She tells him to earn his name, to build an army, and to meet her on the battlefield. But she has one last thing for him to remember. She declares that tonight, she was the one who won. The swordsman can only stare, his mind reeling from her words, and with a final push of her power, she sends him flying. He crashes through the stone wall, his defeat now absolute. She knows that by sparing one life, she has doomed thousands. But it was a necessary price to buy the war she needed. She stands alone on the broken battlements, the fight finally over. And with the last of her strength gone, she collapses to the ground. Her body is broken, her will spent after a night of impossible odds. She lies there, a lone figure against the backdrop of a burning city. A familiar voice asks if she's had a rough night. Black stands over her, his expression unreadable in the dawn light. She admits she got stabbed a lot. He kneels down beside his battered apprentice and tells her it happens to the best of them, Squire. The sun rises over Summerhome, marking the true beginning of her story. The story shifts to a quiet, candlelit room where a woman in armor hums to herself. But she's not alone, noting that her guest reeks of blood. She springs into action with a wild, almost joyful grin. With a dagger in hand, she hopes his words were just a metaphor. He warns that some stains don't wash away, but she just quips about her bathing schedule. Her daggers meet his blade in a shower of sparks. Her eyes narrow as she demands to know. What finally pushed the Chancellor to send an assassin after her? She lunges forward with a powerful armored strike. The assassin reveals that someone must have talked about a secret plan, a plan he seems to know all too well. The armored woman challenges him, asking for an explanation. He takes a single, deliberate step forward. He's not an assassin, he's a squire, Amadeus of the Green Stretch. She scoffs, realizing he's another pup trying to become the next Black Knight. But the squire just offers a confident, knowing smile. Their standoff is cut short by the sound of alarm bells in the distance. He uses the distraction to land a powerful blow to her chest. He grits his teeth, struggling against the force of the strike, and is sent tumbling down a flight of stairs, landing hard at the bottom. But she's already on him, grabbing his arm with a vicious grin. The sounds of their battle echo through the courtyard and spill out into the torchlit halls. But the squire is already pushing himself back up, sword in hand. The armored woman descends, ready to finish the fight. He jokes that this is the part where he reveals a hidden advantage. She seems to consider the possibility for a moment, but Amadeus admits he was just kidding. He explains that he's simply a practical man. And just then, a volley of arrows rains down from above. The armored woman is caught completely by surprise. He explains that for practical people, there's no such thing as a fair fight. The scene shifts as Catherine jolts awake in a cold sweat. She finds herself alone in a simple, unfamiliar room. She realizes it was a name dream, a vision of a past conflict. It showed her the previous squire, Amadeus, ending a hero's life. A grim reminder that she just let her own hero escape. She sighs, figuring her new name is just as blunt as she is. Just then, the sound of a door clicking open breaks the silence. A woman in armor peeks in, glad to see she's finally awake. Catherine asks how long she's been unconscious. Dooney reveals she's been unconscious for 2 days and came dangerously close to never waking up. Catherine nods, the grim reality of her situation sinking in. She shudders, realizing how easily she could have died without even knowing. With a weak smile, she asks if she should thank the Legion's healers. But Dooney explains her injuries were far beyond their skill, so they called in some real mages. A flashback shows a dark ritual, as he reveals it took 3 bleedings to save her. She asks nervously if they bled her for the ritual, but Dooney scolds her, explaining she barely had any blood left to give. Instead, Black had to take the lifeblood of 3 others to save her. Catherine can only stare in horror, asking who died for her sake. He reveals they were Callowan rebels, requisitioned by Scribe. The word echoes in her mind, treated like a simple resource. She realizes her people's lives are just currency to the Empire. The shock sends her reeling, a bloody reminder of the monsters she serves. Dooney asks if she's having second thoughts about her path, but a voice reminds her of the Callowans she's already sacrificed. A hard truth she can't deny. She resolves to ask Scribe for their names, but Dooney stops her. He tells her that can wait. Black is waiting for her outside. She gets dressed, wondering what her mentor could possibly want now. Catherine's face is a mask of apprehension. She swallows hard, having already weighed the costs of her actions. Now it's time to face the fallout. Dooney leads her into a courtyard, noting she has no escort. He explains it's not necessary when a calamity is leading the way. They walk through the eerily quiet streets of Summerhome. Catherine notes that the entire city seems to be deserted, but a sudden hand on her shoulder stops her in her tracks. It's Black, who reveals he knows she let the hero escape. As a roar echoes, he asks if she really thought she'd get away with it. Dooney calls out her name, his voice filled with concern. But Catherine dismisses him, her face a mask of denial. She turns to the captain, asking where she's supposed to meet Black. He tells her the meeting is right here, in the Court of Swords, a place of public execution. On the gallows, the captured rebels await their final sentence. Black watches from horseback, Scribe at his side, overseeing the grim affair. A close-up on his helmet reveals the cold, unyielding presence within. His eye glows with a familiar, terrifying power, and Catherine flinches, finally understanding the price of her failure. Dooney leads her through the crowd, parting the sea of angry faces. The whispers turn to shouts, her own people calling her a traitor. Their hatred is palpable, their insults spat like venom, but Catherine faces them all, her expression a mask of cold defiance. She walks the path they've cleared for her, a public display of her new allegiance, and finally stands before her mentor, who waits like a silent god of war. His voice echoes with power as he calls out to his squire. She demands to know what this is, but he simply calls it the restoration of order. The scene shifts to a quiet room, where the lone swordsman sits alone. A voice calls out his name, Zacharias, asking if he's awake. His hand is tightly wrapped, resting on a stool. Zacharias sits exhausted, his fight having taken its toll. His eyes are weary, but a flicker of defiance remains. A woman named Catherine finds him, surprised he's back already. He confirms he's sober enough for what she needs. She asks if he won, and he boasts about his victory. An orc legionary approaches, saying the soldiers enjoyed the show. He warns Zacharias that the legions will want a fighter like him, but Zacharias scoffs at joining the invaders who killed their people. Catherine tries to reason with him, arguing that life under the legions wasn't so bad. But he argues that better than a corrupt governor isn't the same as good. She tries to argue that some praise are fair, like the Black Knight, but he cuts her off, his expression grim. He warns her that the calamities are no friends of Callow. He reminds her that the legions fight wars, not simple pit fights. The new Catherine listens, his words sinking in. She offers a small smile, telling him not to worry. She offers him a pouch of coins for his help, but he refuses, telling her to keep her money. He reminds her she'll need it when she leaves the orphanage soon. The other Catherine watches him, a troubled look on her face, but she insists that she knows exactly what she's doing. Back in the present, Catherine realizes this isn't the man from her lessons. This is the full, terrifying presence of the Carrion Lord. She looks up, her face a mask of dawning horror. She can't believe he's actually going through with this. She argues that not all of these people were part of the Sons. Some of the condemned were just sympathizers. Her eyes fall on a familiar face, the bartender's daughter, Elise. She explains some were just at the wrong tavern at the wrong time. But Black explains they aided those who took out an imperial governor, a crime of treason, punishable by death. Catherine argues that his spies can sort out who was truly involved. She pleads with him to spare the rest, just as he did in the woods. He asks what she could possibly offer to earn such a favor, but he cuts her off, saying that debt was already paid. He tells her that if she'd brought him a hero's corpse, they could have bargained. But she made a different choice, and it has consequences. She clenches her fist, asking if this is all just another twisted lesson. He denies it, stating this is simply the price for taking up arms against the Empire. She screams that this is blind butchery, an act he'll be hated for. But Black calmly retorts that he's already hated in this city. She grits her teeth, her fury mounting. Her fists clench at her sides, her defiance unwavering. But her anger gives way to a horrified realization. He explains that her current powerlessness is her own doing. By sparing the hero, she acted against her name's nature, weakening her power. She clutches her chest, knowing he's right. She's felt it since she woke up. Still, she accuses him of killing innocents just to prove a point. But Black simply reminds her that he has ended lives for far less. She knows this man standing before her. She's laughed with him, argued with him, and even started to like him. She thought she understood what it was to hate someone. But this cold, calculated cruelty is something new. Her hand instinctively goes to her dagger. She takes a step back, turning away from the scene, and declares that she will have no part in this. But a sudden, overwhelming presence freezes her in place. She thought she knew what true fear felt like. But in this moment, she realizes she was wrong. Black orders the captain to make her face the consequences. Dooney forces her to turn, his grip unyielding. The captain's own expression is filled with regret. Black asks if she truly believed this was all just a game. He reminds her that power is a double-edged sword. That authority demands responsibility, and her ambition requires sacrifice. And so she will stand here and watch every moment of it. The scene shifts to a small figure, reflecting on how it all felt like a dream. It's Chitter, the goblin claimant, watching the condemned with a weary expression. She thinks back on the chaos of names, traitors, and broken swords. Chitter reflects on her own clever plan, a legendary move that she never once questioned. But for Catherine, this all felt like a terrible story. A story playing out on the faces of her people. A tale of fear, despair, and righteous anger. A nightmare from which no one would wake. And the reality of it finally crashes down on her. She sees a familiar face among the condemned Elise, the bartender's daughter, now waiting for the end. And as the sentence is carried out, she can only pray for forgiveness. Chider reflects on the finality of it all. The trapdoors spring open with a brutal echoing sound, and Elise's story comes to a tragic, silent end. For Catherine, a terrible power awakens in her grief. She understands now that this is no dream, it's a tragedy. With the grim affair concluded, Black announces their departure. The captain and scribe can only watch, their faces grim. Catherine finally breaks, the tears streaming down her face. She looks up at her keepers, wondering if this is what victory feels like, and asks herself what could possibly be worth all this pain. 4 days later, they ride into a new territory known as the Reach, a contested borderland also called the Red March for its bloody history. An old Callowan decree once promised knighthood to anyone who could hold a castle here. Catherine looks out at the ruins, a reminder that this land wasn't always a wilderness. A flashback tells the story of a trickster who proposed a neutral third party. He convinced the rulers to make him king of the Reach, a reign that lasted 20 years, until his kingdom came quite literally crashing down around him. Now only crumbling memories and empty tombs remain. At a way station, the company prepares to mount up with fresh horses. A soldier reports to the captain that they're making good time. He estimates they'll reach their destination within a month. But Dooney voices his concern the squire hasn't been herself lately, ever since the grim events back in Summerholm. The captain teases him, asking if he's worried about the girl, but his own expression is far from amused. Dooney admits that he and the men have grown closer to her, but he worries that a squire with a soft heart and no powers is a liability in the wastelands, a concern that's clearly been weighing on him. The captain's voice turns cold, asking if he's calling his apprentice fragile, and Dooney realizes he's just stepped on a very dangerous nerve. Dooney quickly backs down, promising to see to the men. He rides off, leaving Black to his thoughts as the company moves on. Black can only scoff, clearly tired of the conversation. Later that night, Scribe confirms Dooney's fears are valid. She explains that Catherine is wavering, having second thoughts about her path. The brutal lesson in the Court of Swords seems to have broken her spirit. Scribe turns to Black, asking for his take on the situation. She argues that without her name's power, Catherine is a liability. The captain's voice echoes Scribe's concern, asking if she's just a tool to him. But Black simply states the facts, his expression unreadable in the firelight. Scribe argues that she doesn't want to see Catherine thrown to the wolves and aid her. But Black's voice cuts in, questioning if pity will ease her conscience. Scribe slams her book shut, her patience clearly wearing thin. Her hand now rests on the hilt of a dagger. She's not the only one worried. Dooney sits alone, lost in thought. He approaches the captain, suggesting Black should intervene. But Black dismisses the idea, declaring the consequences are Catherine's to bear. He explains that a lesson was taught to her back in Summerholm. And now, they can only wait and see if she actually learned it. A sentiment that does little to ease Dooney's growing concern. Their journey takes them to the Blessed Isles, the border between the Reach and Prize. They ride towards a massive gate, their destination now in sight. The company proceeds in a silent, orderly line across the bridge, and begins the long climb up a set of ancient, weathered stairs. Catherine looks around, unable to see anything but the path ahead. She notes the unsettling quiet that hangs in the air, a silence she finds strangely fitting. For the final resting place of the Order of the White Hand, they arrive at the Sultan Fortress, the former stronghold of the Proceran Paladin, or as Black silently corrects, what's left of it. A fortress that stood for centuries until Black burned it all to the ground. Catherine listens to the grim history, her face a mask of stone. Now the ruins serve as a temporary camp for the Legion. She works in silence, hammering stakes for a tent. She flinches as a soldier calls for a hunting party. Her mind is filled with questions she's had since Summerholm. Questions that only her mentor could answer. But she grits her teeth, unable to bring herself to ask him. She can feel his knowing gaze on her. After all, he knows she willingly spared the lone swordsman. She knows he did something to her that day in the courtyard. He bent her will, forcing her to watch the grim spectacle. And now, the mere sight of him fills her with a burning rage, a frustration she can only take out on the unforgiving ground. But she knows she has to talk to him to fix her broken name. She'd assumed it was because she let the lone swordsman go. But villains spare heroes all the time without their powers getting nerfed. She runs through the ruins, certain she's missing something vital. And as she looks out at the border, a realization dawns. They've finally arrived in the desolate wastelands of Prias. She knows that if she walks through that gateway, her choice is made. If she doesn't run or try to kill the monsters she calls company, she's admitting that no matter the cost, no matter the bloodshed, and no matter how many faces haunt her memories, their anger and betrayal etched into her mind, her own cause must always come first. She stands surrounded by the ghosts of Summerholm, but she turns her back on them, her decision now final. She thought she was ready to be seen as a traitor, but now she wonders if she should just run away from it all. She laughs, questioning the point of running if she's not sure she's wrong. And with that, she reclaims her identity, Catherine Foundling. She turns back towards the gateway, her choice finally made. But a new voice says it's past time they met properly. Catherine realizes she's left her sword back at camp. Her eyes narrow, sizing up the newcomer. The woman in red draws her own blade with a sharp clang. Catherine addresses the heiress, recalling her meddling in Summerholm. But Aqua dismisses it as nothing personal, with an infuriatingly elegant shrug. She explains that she saw Catherine as a threat, and this is just how the game is played. Catherine grits her teeth, recalling Aqua's past actions. But the heiress admits she wasn't sure about Catherine's potential, especially after she let the lone swordsman escape. The accusation hangs in the air, hitting far too close to home. Aqua scoffs, saying the display in the courtyard proved Catherine is no threat. Catherine's mind races, wondering how she could possibly know the truth. She decides Aqua must be bluffing, trying to gain an advantage. So she plays dumb, claiming the hero escaped on his own. Aqua just smiles, smoothly retracting her statement. She then suggests there's no reason for them to be enemies. Aqua acknowledges Catherine's distrust is wise and claims she's come with a peace offering. But Catherine is confused, believing their roles were meant to be in conflict. Aqua just smiles, explaining that they would be if Catherine were a true squire. Catherine clenches her fist, demanding the heiress repeat the insult. But Aqua just mocks her, saying Catherine doesn't truly want the name, a fact she made clear in Summerhome. Catherine warns her to tread carefully, reminding her she's already killed for this title, a threat Aqua finds amusing, retorting she's killed for good theater seats. Catherine fires back that if she's looking for a defense of Praisey morals, she's barking up the wrong tree. Aqua agrees, saying Catherine is different and trying to be one of them will only hurt her. Aqua offers her a way out of this life. She knows Catherine feels trapped, but insists she doesn't have to be. The heiress has a ship waiting to take her back to Lore. Or anywhere else she wants to go, a chance to escape it all, a chance to start over, free from the horrors she's witnessed. But Catherine's eyes narrow, asking what happens if she refuses. Aqua seems surprised that she would even consider it. The heiress offers a smile, but it's as cold and empty as her words. Catherine clenches her fist, weighing the tempting offer. But she looks up with renewed fire, ready to give her answer. Aqua lets out a sigh, disappointed they have to do this the hard way. She gives Catherine one last chance to reconsider, but Catherine's resolve only hardens. The heiress decides it's time to drop the polite facade, and reveals her trump card. She has men surrounding the orphanage back in Lore, ready to end everyone Catherine ever knew. Her eyes are cold, her threat delivered without a hint of remorse. She clarifies that she's not asking for Catherine's life, merely for her to step aside and accept the offer. But Catherine fires back that Aqua's threat only works if she's alive to give the order. The heiress just laughs, reminding Catherine that her name has been broken since Summerhome, leaving her powerless. And if that's not enough to convince her, she has other ways. Aqua's soldiers close in, their crossbows aimed at the cornered squire. But Catherine's eyes burn with defiance, her dagger held ready. The heiress calmly tells her to surrender, calling it the only rational choice. But Catherine's anger fades, replaced by a cold, dawning horror. She pictures the orphanage filled with dozens of young girls, and knows Aqua would end them all without losing a wink of sleep. The fight drains out of her, leaving only a deep, profound exhaustion. Aqua watches on, her victory now all but certain. Catherine finally concedes, thanking her for a lesson she needed to learn. As Aqua looks on in confusion, Catherine admits she's been looking at this all wrong. She explains that in Callow, stories have a certain rhythm, but her own tale was never meant for a happy ending. She can't beat the monsters by being better than them. She has to become the biggest monster of all. Aqua asks if she really thinks this is all a bluff, but Catherine knows the threat is very, very real. And if even one of them dies, she will build a monument to Aqua's ruin. She will turn everything the heiress has ever loved to ash. She will erase every trace of her from the world. A promise so cold and absolute it leaves even the heiress speechless. But Aqua scoffs, certain Catherine doesn't have the stomach for it. Catherine leans in close, her voice a low and dangerous whisper. And with a terrifying grin, she dares the heiress to test her. A silent vow hangs between them, etched into the very ground. For the first time, a flicker of fear crosses Aqua's face. The heiress's perfect composure finally begins to crack. Her soldiers watch on, their crossbows still aimed and ready. Aqua reminds her she's surrounded, but Catherine just laughs at the threat. She points out that she's powerless, armed with only a single dagger, while Aqua has 4 armed men and a sword in her lap. She tells the heiress to look into her eyes, and asks if she truly looks afraid. She admits the odds are stacked, but questions if they're stacked high enough. Aqua can only watch, her own confidence beginning to waver. Catherine's heart pounds, a feeling that makes her feel more alive than ever. She's trapped with nothing but her anger, and that's more than enough. She remembers fighting without a name long before she met the calamities, and with a confident smile she knows she can do it again. The heiress can only stare, her perfect plan now completely derailed. Catherine draws her dagger, ready to fight her way out of this. But she's already moving, a blur of motion. She catches the first crossbow bolt with her bare hand, and deflects the second with her dagger. She closes the distance using one of the soldiers as a shield, a move his allies clearly didn't account for. As their own bolt finds its mark in their comrade, Catherine holds him close, her expression cold and unyielding, and shoves the body aside, her path now clear. She leaps towards her next target, a predator on the hunt. Her eyes burn with a fire that needs no name to fuel it. She taunts the empty space where the heiress once stood. Aqua's fear cost her the victory and her men will pay the price. She lunges at the next soldier, knowing this ends only one way. And with a swift, brutal strike, she takes him down. She claims his sword, her expression cold and resolute. The last 2 soldiers can only watch, their confidence shattered. Catherine turns to face them, ready to finish this. The swordsman trembles, his face a mask of pure terror. Their eyes meet in a silent, deadly challenge. And she closes the distance, their blades clashing in the ruins. The last swordsman desperately tries to block her furious assault, but Catherine easily overpowers him, twisting his arm. She spins past his guard, leaving him completely defenseless, and brings the stolen blade down with brutal finality. Her face is a mask of bloody, terrifying resolve. She turns to the last man standing, daring him to take his shot. She warns him that he'll only get one chance. The soldier hesitates, his face a mask of grim resignation, but a strange green energy suddenly appears on his shoulder. It spreads through him as he chokes, his fight ending before it even began. He chokes, his life snuffed out by an unseen force. And with a final gasp, he collapses to the ground. Catherine stands over the last of Aqua's men, her victory absolute. Her expression is cold, her resolve now unbreakable. But a new figure watches from a nearby wall, casually snacking. He takes a bite, completely unfazed by the carnage below, and seems to be enjoying the show. Catherine stands alone, the stolen sword now discarded. She looks down at her dagger, the rooftop observer still watching, and calmly cleans the blade on the clothes of the fallen. She slides the dagger back into its sheath, her hand still stained. A wicked smile spreads across her face as she asks if the rooftop observer liked her name. She turns away, declaring that they are far from finished. It's time to get back to her lessons, a decision her mentors seem to approve of. The swordsman's words echo in her mind, questioning her allegiance. But now, Catherine finally has her answer. The scene shifts to a quiet, sun-dappled forest, where the lone swordsman lies unconscious on the ground. He slowly comes to, groaning by the side of a river, and realizes with a jolt that his enchanted sword is gone. He's not worried, believing his enchanted blade will find its way back to him. But a new voice cuts through the silence, and he looks up to see a stranger. The man with the spear notes that he looks like he's had a rough night. The swordsman grabs a makeshift club from the ground, and agrees that interesting is one way to put it. The newcomer's hair jingles with small bells as he moves, but the swordsman's eyes gleam, seeing a new opportunity. He explains he fought the new squire, who is apprenticed to the carrion lord. The stranger asks if that makes the swordsman a named figure himself, and he proudly declares his title, the Lone Swordsman, a hero sworn to free Callow. The stranger smiles, finding his quest to free Callow admirable. The swordsman asks for his name, and the man introduces himself as Hunter, a pupil of the Lady of the Lake. He asks if Hunter caught the stag he was hunting, and the man's heart pounds as he confirms it. He then explains a bizarre story about drinking the stag's blood and now being able to talk to birds. He clarifies it's only blue jays who aren't great conversationalists. Hunter says the birds told him someone washed ashore, but now that he's met the swordsman, he can leave. The swordsman seems to ignore the bird part and asks to journey with him. Hunter happily agrees, assuming he's going to meet the lady. But the swordsman's thoughts reveal his true motive, to learn how to kill other named. He knows the lady teaches everyone, from heroes to villains, even the Black Knight himself. He declares that he must, his mind set on his new purpose.